Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. I have just shortly after 7 o'clock, so let's begin. Welcome tonight. There are 3 committee meetings that we'll go through: community planning, environment and natural spaces, and public works and protective services. I'd like to begin, though, by acknowledging that we are on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, and especially our near neighbors, the Chiano First Nation and also the Sauk First Nation. And so with that, I would like to call to order the community planning meeting for January 16th, 2023. So I'll begin with a question to the committee. Are there any additions to the agenda? Mary.
So we have 2 pinked items: the engagement process, as well as the correspondence from Michelle Jones to be added to the agenda.
Okay, so the first pink, the engagement process, will go under the councillor's update, and the correspondence will be under correspondence.
Yeah, so 7C and 8D.
Exactly. Great. Okay. Thank you. And with that, can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Now, Little, seconded by Councillor. All in favor? And opposed? None. Thank you very much. So we next move to public participation. Anyone for public participation?
Thank you. I wish to address the plan for public engagement. First of all, I'm very, very excited and glad to see that getting underway. I have a concern, though, and that is that... Patty Whitehouse, 5311 Rocky Point Road. Thank you for reminding me. So I have a concern, and that is in reading the material that's there so far, I don't see anything, something that should be done probably first, certainly before any community information meeting, anything about identifying options for how the land should end up, and an analysis of the strengths and weaknesses of those options with respect to protecting the land. I know that there's a strong preference on the part of many people for it to just become a conservation area, and all else being equal, I would agree. But is all else equal? Is that the best protection for that land? I note that it's adjacent to, the one side of the land is adjacent to what's going to be a heavily developed urban area. If the land is designated as a conservation area, how are you going to keep those people from going into it and doing all sorts of who knows what? From Highlands, I know that land like that gets mountain bike structures built on it and people camping in it and all that sort of thing. You can post signage that will keep responsible people out. Won't do anything for the irresponsible people. We could have a patrol. How will they be funded? How will they get around the land since there are minimal trails on it? I even wonder whether developing a minimal trail system that does go through the land and allows responsible people to keep an eye on things so that they can report if there's something going wrong might be the best option. I don't know, but I would sure like to have those options identified and explored before the first community information meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Patty.
Stephen Sawyer, 1498 Neil Road. I read all of the material so far that's available on the bufferland question, and I would just like to state for the record that I'm willing to participate on the committee that is looking into it, so please feel free to contact me whenever we get that set up.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Anyone else for public participation? Chris?
Just a minute. Chris Moehr, 4545 William Head Road, President APRM. I'm speaking on a very similar note, and know that you were all aware that this letter on tonight's correspondence agenda was submitted to Mayor and Council on December 18th, and for a number of reasons that meeting did not happen. As it's still, I think, highly relevant, I did ask staff to resubmit a slightly modified version for tonight's committee meetings, and to be honest, I'm not quite certain where it belongs. Certainly to community planning, but also to natural areas, so it's all the same folks, but please accept it for both committees. With your indulgence, I would like to read this submission, slightly modified, for the benefit of those who cannot attend or participate directly this evening. I would also like to add two very short bits that have come to light very recently, and I'll keep it as brief as I can. So, first off, on behalf of APRM, I would like to commend you all for your recent adoption of a resolution to make decisions and adopt policies that recognize our global emergency and biodiversity crisis. Thank you. That was exactly the right thing to do. This is in itself a great starting point, and perhaps now is the time to put it to the test in the context of Metchosin's bufferlands. I will say that it's something of a revelation to be finally advised of Langford's commitment, according to our understanding of the land swap agreement, to ensure that the integrity of Aquifer 606 and similarly affected watercourses, such as Metchosin Creek, to ensure by way of significant infrastructure to be installed within our bufferland zone. This I know you're familiar with. The perceived need for this term of agreement is, I'm sure as you're aware, it's completely understandable, but it begs a number of questions. Now, who exactly will be installing that required infrastructure? What will it consist of? How invasive will it be for Metchosin? When is it scheduled to take place? I understand some things have already happened. And at what stage with respect to Langford's development plans on the upper terrain? Most importantly, who is going to monitor this trespass and associated activity to ensure that it will meet Metchosin's standards and expectations? Further, what plan does Metchosin have at this point in time to deter or eliminate public access from the Langford side at least, so that our buffer lands do not become a park of convenience for language adjacent, all too soon to be high density residential development. Under these circumstances, it seems prudent, you probably already initiated this, to request a detailed action plan from Langford addressing these concerns. And another further note, it might well be a consideration to challenge the validity of the covenant placed on these lands, as it was not publicly discussed, to our knowledge, at any time during the land swap negotiations or the subsequent referendum. A legal opinion just might be in order. I will conclude by stating that we have solid reasons to believe that the concept of moving forward to a dedicated conservation area all too likely could be assisted by federal funding for our buffer lands, and it appears to have significant uptake within your community. Metchosin is again looking for leadership here. A prolonged public consultation period, I know there's a plan to initiate that, but until the latter part of 2023, the ultimate fate of these lands could cause Metchosin to lose this opportunity. Although I'm hearing recently that this federal assistance is in for the next 7 years, but still time is of the essence. Okay, we can be reasonably sure, at least previously, that our neighboring municipality of Langford will be keen to start on their business park and high-density residential development, possibly before we even get to the table. That said, if a way can be found to expedite the public consultation process, I believe it would serve, we believe it would serve Metchosin well. As a minimum, the new federal climate emergency program should be an integral part of any public engagement process, which I'm sure you folks are taking into consideration. So we ask, APRM asks, that Mayor and Council take these questions and points into serious consideration in your upcoming deliberations and actions. And I got 2 extra bits. This is more recent. With respect to a comment made at a previous, I don't know if it was council or committee meeting, in regards to the lack of first growth trees on the lands in question, some of our folks are very conversant with that area. I'm not one of them. No, there isn't. But I seriously doubt that Metchosin has any left. But the curious thing about trees, left to their own devices, they grow. And it's probably time that we collectively start to think about the next generation and the one after that in that context. Secondly, as reported in the Times Colonist, I don't know, a week, 10 days ago, the federally potentially funded conservation spaces have recently been applied to a very small parcel on Sydney Spit, as small as 11 acres. So size does not seem to be a consequence. That's very good news. And quite frankly, 112 is a whole lot more than 111. And I believe it was to protect a small wetland. Just thought you should know, I think there's opportunities here for the entire district. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Aneita.
Aneita Strauss, 1195 Woodley Hill Drive. Hello. My plan had been to address the letter I sent, which was basically a bunch of questions about the buffer lands and the monitoring of the stormwater aspect of that, which apparently there is a pump station or something there, but most basically the major part of the infrastructure that was supposed to have been developed has not been done, and there appears to have been a management plan that was supposed to be created that didn't appear, et cetera, et cetera. So my questions quite a list of them, and I'm not going to bore everybody with the details of them, but I was asking for costs. Who's responsible for what costs? What are things going to cost? Who has veto power? Who's in control of this? And then, fictitiously, this morning, I found out that the covenant, because I wrote all of this without any view of the covenant itself, so I had no idea what was involved with that, and was just basically guessing what was going on, because apparently nothing in terms of management or authorities or responsibilities or costs were being done. So this morning I read the covenant. Now, I'm not a lawyer, and it's full of legalese, really well done, with lots of slang and fancy words and whatever. It took me about an hour to keep rereading it. But if I have understood the covenant, and I may not have, it appears that I now know who's responsible, who's going to pay the costs, and who has the obligations, the liabilities, etc., etc. And the answer is the district of Metchosin. Because very cleverly written in that covenant was the separation of the owner of the property, who was the grantor, and the grantee, which was still that company, but now the entity responsible for building the infrastructure, making sure that everything was cleaned up, monitoring, hiring the engineers, dealing with any infractions, writing the management plan. That was all assigned to this grantee. And if you look at section 3C, it says quite explicitly to me, and I could be wrong, that the sale of the property, the grantee's obligations, responsibilities, and liabilities transfer to the new owner of the property. And for a year after that covenant was signed, some redress could have been done to force those people, force the grantee at the time to do all these things, but nothing was. And this is not a blame game, this is in the past now. But the way it looks like to me is that we have an absolutely enormous expense and obligation and liability on our hands with that whole stormwater management thing. We are going to be responsible for developing the plan. We are going to be responsible for developing the infrastructure, for remediating the land.
I don't quite agree with you, and I will be able to give some clarity after, but I don't see it that way, and nor does the district staff working on this.
Okay.
But
because all I was going to say is I would really like to have some lawyer able to translate that into non-legalese so that the rest of us could actually understand what it's saying, because reading it was terrifying. And I really hope I'm wrong in my interpretation of it. So my letter still stands. I still want to know in an official way, because everything seems to be word of mouth. Like, I don't see any official documents outlining the costs, responsibilities, liabilities, who's in charge, who's leading it, who's following, etc., etc. I'd like to see all that figured out, because it needs to be done anyhow, one way or the other. But I also now want to know whether or not it's District of Metchosin.
Great.
Thank you.
And thank you for your letter. It did allow me to go deeper into the document, and I thought your questions were really prescient. And,
well, they will give you a framework
Yeah.
now to be able to come up with some sort of plan.
For sure. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else for public participation?
You mentioned that there's chairs over
There.
Me.
Sorry. I'm sorry. There is another set of chairs
Morgan.
behind Sarah and Eric here. If there's. Yeah. Go right ahead. We can manage the chairs.
Sorry. That's okay.
What? For not coming with your own chair?
At least I didn't bring my 3 kids, which is why I was late.
Probably over capacity.
And Jay, can you make sure, Jay, make sure that window's open, we've got a door open there.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Okay. Please continue.
Karen Watson, 1290 Boulder Path Road.
I've
Further,
heard of you.
yes. Further to the land swap and information that was not divulged to us at the time of the referendum, I'd like to draw your attention to the maps that were given to all of us about the Greenspace, Metchosin Greenspace, which extends right down here onto Neil Road. So that's what we voted on. A few months later, there's a notice in the Gazette, notice of disposition of option to purchase. Lot E, Section 108, civic address 1165 Neil Road, owned by Key Corp Industrial Developments, which grants the district the right of first refusal. So why, when this is all Metchosin Greenspace, was this small section of a little bit less than 5 acres still owned by Key Corp after the referendum, and Metchosin has to purchase it from them? If they don't purchase it from them, then Key Corp has the right to sell it to whomever, unless Metchosin chooses to buy it. So the property has been sold, so there's nothing we can do about it, that's fine. But what really irks me is that we voted on misinformation. We were misled. And I think that at the very least, I would like you to look into it a little bit further and see why this happened and how it happened, because I'm quite furious about it. It's not right. And I do support the green space remaining wildlife corridor, whatever, and if we want to protect it from the Neanderthals, then have Langford build a fence. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public participation? Okay, going once, twice, 3 times. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Okay, so we'll next move on to the adoption of the minutes. And I actually do have a change to this one, to the minutes of, where are they? November 21st, 2022. November 21st, 2022. Just in, excuse me. Sorry, in section 4, I would like a change to my councillor's update. And the change is really just to reflect that the planning committee is not going to do everything. We're not going to look at fiscal planning, climate change, water, green space, housing, agriculture. That's going to be done by the rest of council, like through their various committees and their activities. So the change, and Tina, I can give this to you after, would be the committee will also be looking at strategic planning for strengthening Metchosin as a rural community, period. And then after that, more broadly, council members will also be looking at long-term fiscal planning, climate change, water, green space, housing, etc. So just break that up a little bit more. And if there are no other comments, I wonder if I could get a motion to approve with that amendment. So Councillor Donaldson and Mayor Little seconds. And any discussion on those minutes? Call the question. All in favor of adopting the minutes? Thank you very much. And opposed? None? Great. Thank you very much. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is receipt of minutes from the Dogs in Metchosin Working Group. And we'll be addressing this a little further on, but right now all we want to do is adopt the minutes and we'll be able to talk about them further. There will be some action. So,
Move adoption.
Councillor Rett moves adoption, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. And discussion? Hearing none, call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Thank you very much. So adopt. Okay. So no business arising. Okay, staff report. Excuse me. Okay, so item 7A is a variance for 4080 Dupree Drive. And so this is a variance for an attached secondary suite. The variances that will need to be addressed are to reduce the minimum common wall definition to 6.25 meters, from 6.25 meters to 3.2 meters, and then reduce the rear yard setbacks from 10 meters to 3 meters. So now, regarding this variance, I want to open it up and hear from the committee, but I should point out that what is common practice over the years from the past council is that before any decisions on an application are made, that 2 things would happen. So notices of the application would be sent to neighbors within 60 meters of the residence, and that a site visit by council would be booked. And so that would be my recommendation to move forward. But with that, I will just turn it over to the committee for further comments. Go ahead, Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, so in rereading this, because this was all presented, or was going to be presented until we got the snowfall.
Use your mic, please.
Is it not on?
Maybe.
Yeah, you got
Okay, I
it.
just need
Talking
to
to you.
speak up. So going through the package, I did notice also that the Board of Variance has already looked at this
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
has refused this variance. So I would like to know the reasons why.
Okay. Mayor Little.
Yeah, I can shed some light on that. So the Board of Variance did meet. They did, as you say, they did refuse it. The board discussed this application as a major or a minor variance and advised the applicant that the council was, that the committee, or sorry, that the council was the only body which could consider granting a major variance. So they asked the applicant to bring this forward to council. So it was denied. It was refused, but they made no comment. It was major versus minor. So the decision about this is up to council. So they did make some other comments in their minutes as well regarding the 3-meter setback was a minor variance. The common wall variance was presented a major variance, and those were their comments.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Councillor.
I'll move option 1, request that staff send notices to landowners within 60 meters of the property, informing them of the application in the February 2023 council meeting, when issuance of the permit will be considered. In addition, I would like to add that we have a site visit.
Great. Do I have a seconder for that motion? So Councillor Gray seconds. Any discussion?
Councillor Shukin, I wonder if we might get some information from the planner about the reason for the 20-foot or 6.25 meter common wall requirement. Like what exactly, when we change that, what are we doing in terms of the rationale for that requirement in the first place?
Okay.
So if that could be included in our next package, that'd be great.
Great. Maybe I could ask our CAO for just a thought here. So to address Councillor Gray's question about the rationale for the change in the wall length, and I'm wondering also if we might have more feedback when we do our site visit. So I think what we might do is provide that feedback to you and then on to the planner for comment in a further report. Is that, could that work?
That will work.
Okay,
Yeah, it's not so much the reason for the change, but the reason for the requirement in the first place.
gotcha. Okay, yeah, thanks, that's, yeah. Okay, thanks, yeah. Okay,
So
very little.
perhaps for the community that's watching, can you explain what's going to happen next? With the motions on the table, I understand that,
Yeah.
but this would be a good time to let the community know what the process is.
Yeah. Okay, so what I understand will happen now is notices will be sent out to the homes within 60 meters. They will have a chance to comment on the variance. Meanwhile, we will have a site visit that's booked at some point soon. What will then happen is whether likely our comments from that site visit could go back to our CAO for further input by the planner, who will, I believe, then do a subsequent report at the next planning meeting. So we will all have another chance to look at this and make a decision. So, sorry, go ahead.
It goes to council.
Goes to council. Okay. Why would it go to, okay, sorry, why would it not come back to the planning committee?
Because only council can approve the.
Okay, gotcha, yeah. Okay, okay. Sorry, Sue, sorry, I don't want to debate process with you, but wouldn't it come back to the planning committee then for a recommendation to council? I think it would just come back to the planning committee again.
It always goes to council.
Yeah, for final approval, for sure. Okay, we can talk about this further, yes. Okay, so any further discussion on the motion before us, which is to notify the neighbors and then also the site visit? Mary Lou.
Yeah, I would just like to say that we are definitely going to talk about this at the next planning meeting. Time is of an essence for this family. So this was brought before the Board of Variance in November. And before that, they've done a considerable amount of work in terms of the architectural design consultation process. This is getting long for them. And so I would just the chair of the planning committee to give them a commitment that we will have a site visit very soon, next week, if we can do that, and then we can move on this relatively quickly.
Great, thank you very much. And those are good comments, and I do appreciate that there are some circumstances and time is of the essence for this family, so we'll get to it as soon as we can. I think it is important though, however minor it may seem, to do a site visit, and I think we've found that out as a district and council as we go. So, great. Hearing no more comments, I will call the question. Those in favor of the motion? And opposed? Thank you. That passes. Good. Good. Okay. Okay, item 7B, the Weir's Beach stairs. Okay, so before us is a report from our engineer, and as you may recall, the stairs were closed and the trail was closed last year due to poor condition and concerns about safety. So Mr. Hurley, our engineer, has come back with two options to address this. So option one is the construction of prefabricated metal stairs, and this comes with an estimate of $50,000. Option two, which is to fix and replace the current stairs and trail, that has an estimated cost of $15,000. And of course the timing here is impeccable because we are in the midst of budget discussions as well. So I do want to note that we have heard from nearby residents, both those who live adjacent to the trail, and we've heard about, and those who visit the trail as nearby residents. And so we've heard about parking issues, traffic safety issues. We've heard about garbage on the trail, the noise that happens as well. And we've also heard about concerns about the trail being potentially closed for a longer duration. So I do have an approach that I would like to raise with the committee, but I would like to turn things over for comments before that. Or maybe you want me to throw up my...
How about your approach?
My approach. Well, I think the thing to do is to turn this over to PTASC for deeper consideration. There are parks and trail specialists. It would be great if council has, or sorry, the committee has comments that we could bring to PTASC. They are meeting tomorrow, but it would be great to hear from them a recommendation on which option they might consider or another option. The one interesting factor that I have to throw out on this situation with the trail and the stairs is there is a portion that is infringing on the neighbor's property. So there is an element of trespass on a private property from the existing sort of setup there. So that is something that has to be addressed. And so the chair of PTASC is very well aware of this, and I think the members are as well. So as it happens, PTASC is meeting tomorrow night. So that would be my suggestion.
Okay. Well, then I'll make a motion to refer this to PTASC. I would also like to get their comment on the parking as well.
Right.
So just for everybody's benefit, the access to the Weir Beach stairs is at the other end of Weir Beach from the sand gate. Across the street from this statutory right-of-way, there are spaces for 4, maybe 5 cars. Sometimes they're squeezed in a little bit more. Right at that corner, there's a hairpin and the traffic moves from the William Head Institution towards Sandgate at almost warp speed at times. And while we were standing on site, Mark Atherton, the chair of PTASC, myself, and one of the landowners, there was a near miss as we were standing there, as well as a near miss with the bus. I'm told this is a regular occurrence, and I would like actually to see no parking there, because this was the intent of this statutory right-of-way beach access was for locals. Okay, and what has happened with the pandemic is that with the pandemic, it was put on one of the trail apps. A lot of people found out about it, and it became very popular as access. There are no washrooms there. There are no rubbish bins. And unfortunately, people park there, and they're there for 8 or 9 hours. They must have very big bladders, because there are no facilities there. I would like a recommendation to come back from PTASC, because personally I would like to see no parking signs there, because the original intent of it was for local, I mean, we're all local, but the people of the area to have access to the Weir Beach, and it really does represent a significant liability to the district, since we have signs regarding parking. So it would appear to a judge anyways that we were aware of the parking and we were aware of the risk, and it is significant risk there. Mm-hmm. So if we could send this to PTASC with the 2 options that are here, as well. PTAS, or Parks and Trails Advisory Select Committee, is our boots on the ground committee. They do have access to a work crew as well. I'd also like to say that one of the landowners has offered his expertise as a structural engineer. I think he's a structural engineer with expertise in marine environments. He's also willing to help. This could be a community event, community building event. So with all that, I would recommend sending this to PTASC.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mayor Little. The other thing I would like to include in any package that goes to PTASC is the correspondence that we received from residents. So, yeah. And thank you for your input, because I know that you were on this file before the election. So, great, Councillor Gray.
And if we could ask PTAS to set this up in the sense of their priority list, all the projects they've got, where would it fit in their priorities, and also in terms of budget,
okay,
where it would fit in terms of budgetary priorities for them. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. Great. Okay, there was a motion on the floor. Councillor Donaldson, sorry.
Okay. So I agree with that. What I had read in the report as well is that there wasn't acknowledgement that this actually is a neighborhood connector trail, and that it didn't go anywhere. Well, in actual fact, it does. It does connect. Not too far from there is the Ron Weir Trail, which then goes up to the Pearson Trail, Galloping Goose, and if you're really energetic, down the Goose and Lombard and back, it's a really great loop. So we do have neighborhood connector trails throughout the community, and this one has always been quite integral. I've used it a number of times. The parking is definitely an issue. Oftentimes people are parked in the bus parking area. So the no parking would be, I think, an asset, especially for the residents in that area.
Great. Thanks very much, Councillor Gray.
But we're asking for their advice on parking at the moment, not asking for advice on no parking, but just generally, what do we do about parking?
I think the options for their advice are pretty broad in terms of parking,
Yeah.
no parking or parking. So, funny thing about parking, I think the more you offer it, the more cars are going to come, the bigger the problems are going to be. So, but Mayor Lee.
Yeah, I also just thought that the next question will be asked was if we could put in rubbish bins and washroom facilities. The Parks and Trails and I met in the early part of last term in, I think it was spring of 2019, with the CRD parks. And the Parks chair was there, or Parks and Trails chair was there. They did tell us a lot about what their experience is with public washrooms. They recommended that we not go that way because it's terribly expensive, not only to maintain, but also to install, and they're often very abused. But I think PTAS could give you more of an explanation, because I suspect that's would also be the next letter that we'll receive.
Okay,
Okay?
great, thank you. Okay, motion on the floor. Any further comments? A question. Okay, so we're in the middle of the committee meeting right now. Okay, I will make an exception.
It's just that a number of people have showed up tonight to speak to this, and they are not able to attend the meeting tomorrow, and 2 of them have lived in that area for 40 years. One of the residents, her husband was instrumental in taking the rope out and putting the stairs in, with a municipal permit, by the way. And so I just think that it's fine to push it over to the next committee, but you're never going to get the history unless you listen to people and put it on the record.
Okay, so Michelle, that's why we have public participation. It is an open forum. It goes for 45 minutes. And we're not, sorry, I hear you, and I have read the letter that you sent, so I appreciate you giving some background. I'm not going to take any further comments, and the reason is we have a very busy agenda tonight. So I would just ask that the next time that this comes up, that the people take the opportunity for public participation.
I guess if we didn't know that you had to do that, then we would have.
Actually, so don't forget, this is going to go to the Parks and Trails Committee. They're going to make a recommendation. It's going to come back to this committee for discussion. So there'll be further opportunity to discuss. And you're right, it is at public participation that people usually bring that forward. So there will be an opportunity once we hear back from our advisory committee. So we're not saying no. We're not saying no. These letters will be forwarded to the Parks and Trails. That is the process.
So again, what I would suggest, and I'm sorry that we don't want to deny you opportunities. We do have a full agenda though. So 2 things, please write us. And then also there is public participation at the PTAS meeting tomorrow, which is in this chamber.
Well, some of us have to work tomorrow,
Okay.
so we can't.
Yeah, no, understood. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Thomas.
We do have emails and phone numbers on the website too. Yeah, please read them.
And not only did council approve the previous, so did they approve the scouts to repair that trail in 2014.
Okay, no, understood. Yeah, there will be another opportunity to provide that information. And yeah, okay, thank you. I'm going to call the question. Those in favor of the motion, and the motion being to refer this to PTAS with a reference to parking and other matters as well. All in favor? And none opposed. Thank you. Okay. So moving on to Councillor's update. Okay. So the first item on the agenda is a request to begin a formal engagement process regarding the future of the bufferland. So without realizing it, perhaps, we have now crossed the 12-month threshold in terms of when the possible sale to the CRD of the bufferland came to light, and that was in October of 2021. So that's over a year. It surprised me. The response to that plan was immediate and highly critical, and public was highly critical of the plan to sell the land to the CRD. There was discussion at that time about the need for public input into the future of the bufferlands and how this would be managed, how the lands would be managed. And Councillor Marie-Therese, as she was at that time, was a champion of involving residents and community members in that question. And I remember you saying this should have happened well before these negotiations began. Tonight, I would like to take the first step toward a formal and cohesive public engagement process regarding the bufferland, and a proposal is attached. It's on, well, it was on page 19 of the former agenda, but it's now delivered as a pink, as I understand it. So let me walk you through the basics. So what's proposed is a process with 2 core components. The first is organizing a working group to identify and evaluate management options for the bufferland. Second, that there are opportunities for broader public input both early in the process and as it proceeds. So regarding the working group, terms of reference will be developed, which I'd like to bring to this committee in February. And then a community information session will be held to kickstart the process. And I would like to set a goal of the working group generating recommendations for future land use options within 6 months of forming. And at that point, a further community information meeting will be held for broader input on the options. So it will be after that point that the recommendations are brought to council for their consideration. So again, the recommendations will be brought to council for their advice and input. The working group is just simply there as a think tank. So I just want to address the comments that were made earlier on public participation. The goal of the process is to actually generate options. It's not to start out with options that are then reviewed. It's to begin at the ground level. And of course, there is a desire with some is to fence off, to not have any not have any visitors in the buffer land. That's an option I think we have to look at, but we have to reality test it and check it financially and legally as well. So with that, I would, you've got the proposal before you, committee, and I would welcome your comments on this. Councillor.
Well, I really appreciate the comprehensive report you've got on it. It really seems like a really reasonable plan moving forward. And I would actually like to move that we begin the bufferland public engagement process according to your way you have it set up.
Okay, well, thank you. There is a motion on the table, Councillor Donaldson, or do you want to make a comment?
I'd like to actually add to that, if we could, about creating the terms of reference.
Okay, great.
I think that was part of the request there. Terms of reference for the working group,
Yeah,
for the public engagement process.
great, thank you. Exactly.
It is.
Great, thanks.
Okay, so I think if I can understand your motion, it's to move ahead with the next step of this public engagement process based on the proposal before us, which would be development of the terms of reference for the working group. Something
Right,
like that.
that's worded way better than I did.
Okay, so, yeah. Okay, do I have a seconder? Great, Councillor Gray. And any discussion now on the motion? Councillor Gray.
Yeah, just a couple of things. I think this is great to get it going. We heard from the public and we had some correspondence about the length of time this will take. And so I'm learning that things take a long time when you're in government, it turns out. But if we can shorten it up as best we can, I think that would be advisable for everybody's benefit. The other thing is that it seems to me that when we're doing this work, Karen talked earlier about, or I think about, or someone did about the options, seeing the options beforehand. I see what we're doing here is actually developing the options, as you say, but I do think we need to get going probably in the time while the terms of reference are being set, that we actually ascertain any binding obligations related to the buffer land with regards to Center Mountain Estates, the developer there, the developers of the industrial land, the City of Langford, and the CRD. We have already an LOU of 2018. We have the title of 2017. We've got a sale agreement with the CRD has that been canceled legally. I just think those things are necessary to conduct the public process, because if there are any limitations on the land or the use of the land, we need to know those when you go into the process rather than after the fact. It would upset things. So if that work can be done, maybe much of it's done by staff, but just getting that clear so that when the meetings first happen, we're sort of laying it out for everyone, I think would be worthwhile. The second thing I'd suggest is that we get a formal appraisal, the land value. And that's because many of us were upset at the value that the CRD offered. And it seems like, well, this is a very important and special piece of property, and getting appraisal this time at this particular point might be advisable rather than waiting till the end and seeing what we're doing with things like that.
Okay, thank you for those comments, Councillor Graham. I do agree that it is important to understand where we're at with any obligations. And again, we have just, I don't know if discovered is the right word, but that covenant is very new, and there's something there that we were not aware of, so, yeah.
That would be a big help. The other point I would make would be that MEASC has done a really nice report on things, and I think I see we've got the survey that was done, which may not have been the most ideal survey, but the results are rich. So MEASC has done that work, and PTASC also. Those should feed into the public process, just with respect to the committees, but also the value of what they've offered us, and I think will offer the working group and everyone else.
Absolutely, yeah. No, the survey was done, MEASC has provided comment, and also PTASC as well, so those have to inform the process to some degree, so, yeah. Okay, we have a motion on the, Mayor Little.
Yeah, and so I agree, and thank you for those comments. I do think it's important to figure out where our contractual obligations are. I think I would beg to differ, actually, that we don't need an appraisal, only because it's an expense to the community, to the taxpayers, and also if we're not interested in selling, and I haven't heard an appetite yet to sell it, what would be the inherent value of assigning a dollar amount, especially because the residents might argue that that assigned dollar figure would be way below what they feel it's worth. And so I would suggest that we wait, go through the public consultation process. If at that time we hear significant input from the community that they're interested in selling it, then we would get an appraised. I think we already know it's worth a great deal to Metchosin. The assessed value of 200 and some thousand, I can't imagine, and I haven't met anybody that thought that that was a very fair price for that, given what has been sold in View Royal and recently in East Souk. So I think we could probably all say it's worth a great deal more than it was assessed by a third party for the CRD. And I think that would be good enough, and we could focus our energies and our resources on this engagement process. Secondly, you're right, it does take a long time to do these things at the local government level. I've had to learn that myself. However, this deserves the time that it will take to have significant public engagement.
Great. Councillor, correct.
Yeah, I suppose my interest is not shutting off any of the options that the working group will prepare, and one of the issues that they may come up with is, we're talking here about management options. So I think of land use, plan, zoning, those sorts of things. But if it goes further than that in terms of what options are there, a realistic option is that, you know, Metchosin manages it. Another realistic option is the CRD manages it. I'm not opining that those are the things we should do, but I would argue that we need to formally close off the sale agreement with the CRD, so it's done, so that if we re-enter negotiation at some future time, we don't have an anchor of this old small number. The appraisal, I'm sort of a view, we should probably be appraising any of the district's lands, so we know what we've got.
Okay.
But that's more of a baseline issue, and I'm not sure that the cost is that great. But
yeah.
I'll just provide you that advice, and we can think on it.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. I'm just going to make one comment. I have to say I'm with Mayor Little. There might be some broader value in doing an appraisal, but in terms of the buffer land at this state, I feel like that might presume an outcome, which I don't think we're at that point. So, but go ahead, Mayor Little.
And I just want to make sure everybody heard you correctly. The sale agreement and the sale negotiations with the CRD have ended. There are no discussions between the District of Metchosin at this time and the CRD to sell those buffer lands. So I just want to make that clear so that nobody has misunderstood you.
Correct. Yes, I think I've heard that from people. I haven't seen a document yet that says the sale is done. And that's what's missing, is when you're working in contracts and legal documents, generally speaking, you have a wind up. You know, you write it down, say this is over, and both parties agree to that. That's what I haven't seen yet, but I take your point that it's done. I just haven't seen that document.
Yeah. I haven't seen that either, but we can provide that to council, absolutely.
Okay.
If we have it.
Okay, there is a motion on the floor, and again, generally it goes that we will proceed with the next step of the public engagement process based on the proposal before us, the next step being the development of the terms of reference. And, yeah. And any further comments on that? Any further discussion? And if not, I will call the question. Those in favor of the motion? And opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, so the next issue is the Center Mountain Stormwater Detention Pond. And bear with me for 1 minute here. Okay. So regarding the stormwater detention pond, so we've recently become aware that there's a Section 219 covenant on title of the buffer land. Section 219 refers to the Land Title Act, and there's a Section 219 allows for covenants in favor of the district doing something or not doing something, or local government and other public bodies. So there's a 219 title on the buffer land that allows the developers of the Center Mountain residential development, so this is the residential development, to construct and maintain a stormwater detention pond within the buffer land. So this information became known in early December 2022 to myself and others on council, and there was a decision made to share this with the public at the earliest opportunity, and we were going to do that at the meeting that was canceled in December. Now, we all know that the buffer land has generated considerable interest over time, and we also know that the buffer land has generated a considerable number of surprises. So we learned that there was a letter of understanding about a trail that the developers were to be built, and that was what Councillor Weir was referencing earlier. Then we learned of the proposed sale in October 2021 to the CRD. Then we learned that the sales agreement tied to the buffer land would have also opened the door for the sale of other parcels of land that Metchosin might well come into, and that was through the land swap. So again, here we have another surprise. What we do know is the covenant was put on title in 2017 within a few months after the land swap. So that's really important. So the covenant goes with the land. Whoever owns the land on both sides of the buffer has an obligation and rights that are written into that, outlined in the covenant document. So it appears to have been developed and put on title before the completion of the boundary adjustment, which was done in the summer of 2017. And so before Metchosin actually owned the land. Still, that said, I can't explain why the information was not revealed earlier, given the public interest in the land and, of course, in the land swap. And this would have been in development. It was put on title in March, but I believe that there are FOI records showing that there was awareness and understanding much before that time as well. And you'll notice in the covenant document, it specifically mentions the district. So, okay, so the grantor, and here's what it is in a nutshell if you haven't had a chance to read it. This is a bit tedious, but stick with me. Okay, so the grantor, which is Metchosin, hereby grants and conveys in perpetuity and at all times to the grantee, which is the developer, the uninterrupted right to enter in upon, over, for the purposes of constructing, reconstructing, installing, improving, extending, altering, repairing, maintaining, inspecting, and operating certain drainage works and other apparatus and materials required in connection with one or more stormwater detention ponds, the size, design, and location of which have been approved by the grantor, again Metchosin, in writing prior to the construction and installation. It goes on to talk about a little bit more about what's involved, but okay, and this will be built as necessary to ensure that the stormwater flowing from the development lands into Metchosin Creek are maintained at a level, at pre-development levels. So there's a lot there, and I will get into a little bit more of that in a moment here. But it's important to point out that the vital requirement stated in the agreement is that the developer must get Metchosin's prior written consent as to the size, design, and location of the works, and there's also a right to look at the stormwater management plan. So there's good news and bad news here. So again, because the covenant is on title, we have very limited opportunity to change this. I hear people's concerns about or interest in maybe testing the validity of this. and maybe we can look into that, but it is on title, and we are working with that understanding. The good news is that the district appears to have input into the broader stormwater system that will be put in place for the development. And that's really important in terms of the health of not only Metchosin Creek, but Bilston Creek as well. Okay, so the intent of sharing this information tonight was to bring to light a major encumbrance on the buffer land, particularly as we look toward the future, what the buffer land might look like. Okay, so I have two thoughts about an action here, and I'm sorry, this came to me before I finished up my agenda, so I put the action down as to be determined, and I'd like to throw those out, and then maybe we can talk further about this. Okay, so now I don't want to tax our legal budget too much, but I think that there's room and value in having some legal advice and some focused questions related to the Section 219 document, and we can get into that a little bit more. But I would like to make a recommendation that we, as a committee, prepare some questions that we believe are outstanding with this title document and get some clarity from our legal counsel. So that's the first option. The first action. The second is that I believe that we need a further reference point to what's approved than simply our municipal engineer, who I think is competent and who's doing a good job in representing our interests. So what I would like us to consider on this matter is that we look at an approach that would have larger stormwater infrastructure and the works there reviewed by MEASC prior to the approval by your engineer. It's not before the engineer gets it, but it's before he approves the works, such as he does. Now, this could be done very much in a way like a subdivision policy, which is very short. We have a policy on the books that any subdivision over 4 houses is automatically referred to MEASC. That's a policy. And the reason that's important is normally politicians have to stay out of subdivision approvals, and I think there's a whole body of law, not just in BC, but throughout Canada around this. So we shouldn't be technically involved in approval or non-approval, but we can set policy. And what I would recommend is that we set a policy that any major stormwater works be referred to MEASC for review and input to our engineer before approval. So those are the two actions I would put forward here. And I would open it up to the committee's thoughts and input. So, Councillor Gray, looks like you want to speak.
Sure. I'll move that the title document be referred to legal counsel for advice.
Okay. Do I have a second? Councillor F seconds that. Could we end discussion on the motion?
I would just say the reason why, so Aneita had looked at it, it's a very complicated document. It actually is an agreement between the company itself and Metchosin. And the company itself do a bunch of things in the document. You think, what's going on here? You can look at it. It's a confusing piece, and it would be very good to get very clear who's obligated to do what.
Yeah. There's one thing I just want to mention here, again, about the complication. Sorry, it was two Anita's questions.
My particular interest is over time, who does what. You sort of got the picture that this company will build the facility, but what happens then?
So one of the sections in the covenant document, which would be good to get some clarity on, is the grantor will not use any portion of the easement area or allow the servient land, so that's the buffer, to be used for any purpose which would detract from or substantially interfere with the function of the works on the easement area. So that's, again, back to your comment about what's ahead for us. The other thing that I'm curious about is who owns the stormwater works after the land begins to be sold, and the simple answer might be Langford, but I don't know if that's totally clear. That Langford is not mentioned in here, and there's reference to a strata company as well. That if it becomes a strata, what happens then in terms of ownership? So I think that's an outstanding question. I thought I had written that down, but I appeared not to have. So, but again, there are a number of questions. I don't think we have to spend dozens of hours on this, but I think there is a few things that would be great to get clarity on. So,
So I'll second that motion.
Oh,
you've already said, okay,
yeah,
sorry.
Councillor,
If I could speak to
yeah,
that.
please.
Yeah, so what I wanted to say is I agree. I'd like to know what our roles and our responsibilities are in this, what encumbrances we have according to this. You're right, and the public's right, it is a very complicated document. What Councillor Gray said is right, that the grantor and the grantee are the same thing. It's a numbered company. I don't know who they are. I don't know if we can find out who they are. But it's a numbered company that is both the grantor and the grantee, and it makes it rather complicated.
Can I just clarify that though? So again, that's exactly it. And so this was the situation in 2017. And what happened is the grantor at that time sold the land under an option to Metchosin, and they then assumed the duties and obligations.
And the liabilities.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So.
Okay, and then my third comment is, at some point, I'd like to loop in the Langford staff. And members of the community would probably say, whoa, why would we want to do that? Well, they have a lot more resources than us. They have a lot more resources, and I do want to say that we have a new relationship with Langford. There's a different council there. We're developing new relationships. I would like to take advantage of what they would have to offer us at their planning and their engineering expertise. They have greater capacity than us, so I would like to suggest we also reach out to Langford at some point and utilize their expertise.
That's a great point, yeah. And clearly there is a new vibe at Langford City Hall, so thank goodness.
You say that out loud.
I did, absolutely. So there's a motion on the table to refer this to our legal counsel. And again, I think when we say this, I think we have to develop some focused questions and some direction to our legal counsel, and be conscious of the budget that we're incurring here. So, okay. I will now call the question. Those in favor? And none opposed. Thank you very much. Now, the second action I'd thrown forward was that we look at developing a policy that MEASC would get an opportunity to look at any management plans or any material related to major stormwater works that were being considered for Metchosin. And the motion I would suggest, if I could ask this, is that this be referred to staff for further consideration as to what a policy could look like. Again, the subdivision policy is very brief. It's just like 2 sentences here, and so I think it doesn't have to be super tedious. But any thoughts from the committee?
I'd like to send it to MEASC regardless.
Yeah. Well, the one thing, again, this is where we get into complications, because I don't believe this will come to council. We can go and we can meet with Al, and I could be wrong in this, but we can go and meet with our engineer, get information that way, but I don't believe it comes to council for any type of approval. Again, we could maybe ask Sue Lynn for some clarity on that as we go and maybe look at an option to the policy. Yeah. Well.
Yeah, I get the point. It seemed when I spoke to the engineer some time back, I was wondering about the access that the equipment would have, or perhaps he was, do the least damage possible as these big machines go in there. And I asked, well, could we ask MEASC to help provide some advice on the access way in? Is it off Neil Road? Is it directly down from the development? And he said, yeah, that's reasonable enough. So maybe it's our engineer seeking MEASC's advice.
Yeah.
But there is a possibility that resource could come to bear on the question.
Okay. The reason that I would suggest a policy is we don't want to rely on just that as, maybe it's something the engineer feels he should do or not do. It's just something that, yeah. Go ahead.
I'll make a motion then that staff develop a policy on major stormwater works that Meesk be involved to advise.
Great. Yeah. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Rapp? Any discussion? And again, this is, the recommendation would be that something comes from staff and then council gets a chance to further scrutinize. So, Mayor Little.
Yeah, I just, I'm not saying I disagree. I'm just saying that we often, in subdivision applications, it's normally referred to both PTASC, the Parks and Trails Advisory Select Committee, and the Metchosin Environmental Advisory Select Committee. So it's referred to both.
Okay.
Now,
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's a policy. That's just what we do. So there may be some wisdom to referring it to both.
Okay. Could you amend the motion to that? Yeah.
Yep. So I would like to amend the motion to include referral to both Meesk and PTASC.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Rapp. Sorry. Okay. Excellent. Any discussion on the amendment to include PTASC? Okay. I'll call the question on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment? Okay. Okay, now back to the main motion. Councillor Craig.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to the motion itself. Looking at the documents, I wanted to reference, I've forgotten who made this comment during public participation, but Chris Moehr, about the climate and using the climate lens here. You'll notice that the stormwater management facility is going to be designed for a 200-year event. And these days we could get that 200-year event next week. So it seems to me that we do need to, our engineer needs to be thinking about these things, and we may want to have a memo to self in terms of our capital budget if we have to kick in to make it better than what was agreed before. But I'm also thinking about the entire watershed here, the Bilson Creek watershed and others. But particularly, I'm thinking about this plan so far is to control volume or watch the flows. And so the idea is that pre and post development, this stormwater management facility will keep the post development flows equivalent to the pre-development flows. That's the contractual obligations here. But nothing said about the quality of the water. And so I'm wondering, and there's some other folks who've been talking about this in the last few weeks, about an engineered wetland where we have native plants and sort of more of a natural area rather than a big hole with a pipe coming up and a pipe leading out. There could be something else that's quite particular that would be a benefit in terms of not just the flow but the quality of the water, clearing out the sediments or chemicals that may come down, that kind of thing. So an engineered wetland might be a much preferred solution for us as compared to just a mechanical type facility. And I think Meesk might be a first step along that path. The point I want to make, though, in addition, is that this is an urgent problem as compared to the public input process, which can take some time. The developers are going to want to move quickly.
Yeah.
They're going to want to move fast. And I think, just taking a point from Mayor Little's comments, we should get involved with Langford on this so that our staff are talking back and forth, and perhaps Meesk or others can engage. I'm thinking we need a surface groundwater management plan with Langford involved. This is to do with what we're talking about, as far as we know, is to do with the residential development, but the industrial development will put drainage into Bilston Creek one way and Metchosin Creek the other. So there's lots to be done here, and I don't have a plan exactly, but I think the Meesk referral is a good start, and I want to raise some of these other issues tonight just so you knew where I was coming from in terms of Meesk's involvement.
Great. Well, the one thing that I wonder about as well is post-construction monitoring, performance measures. So how do you know that your system, of which the detention pond is only a part of, is actually working? And that's, as you say, that involves quality monitoring as well in Bilston Creek. So, Marilyn.
I just wanted to point out that we have excellent advice from our engineer who comes in once a week, but he is a civil engineer. Hence my suggestion that we make use of the Langford engineering team who may have other expertise in this area. And I also just want to point out the obvious, that that's what trees do. That's what the ecosystem of trees do, is they slow water. They absorb water, they filter water, so we don't run into problems as what you're pointing out. And since the trees have come down, now, I almost said man, but now us humans are trying to do what trees and their ecosystems do naturally. And so I think it's a good cautionary tale of what we're experiencing here. And if you saw what we saw the other day when we were walking the lands with our visitors, you would sort of understand that more.
Totally. Yeah. No, and stormwater management, as much as I'm aware of it, is fascinating and very complicated, because exactly as you say, Mary Lou, we're trying to replicate what trees and the natural ecosystem are trying to do. So, okay, so we still have a motion on the floor, and that is to refer this to staff for the development of a policy related to stormwater with reference to providing this to me, asking Pete to ask for input prior to a decision by the engineer. So, okay, and with no further discussion, I will call the question. Those in favor? And opposed? And opposed. Thank you very much. Okay. Moving on, so the next item on the councillor's update is Centre Mountain water infrastructure. Now again, one of the surprises with this development is the fact that we learned that shortly after the developers began work, there was a variance that they obtained with the city of Langford to allow for septic and well water to be used at the business park. And that raised a number of concerns because of the potential impacts to the aquifer of the area. Aquifer 606 serves many of us here in Metchosin, including, I think, almost everybody here at the council table. So there was a change last year where the previous council introduced a bylaw to allow for the borrowing of upwards of $40 million to support the delivery of water infrastructure and roads. And that was finally adopted by the new council just recently. So I just wanted to flag that and congratulate them for moving forward with that. So, great. The next item on my list is just the Metchosin Municipal Grounds User Group. I did make contact with the user. It isn't. What is
Dogs and Metchosin.
Dogs and Metchosin. Oh, I'm sorry. Too much paper here. Okay. Okay, so I want to take you back to the minutes that were approved earlier. And there was a request from the Dogs Working Group that this be referred to staff for inclusion in a revision to the Animal Control Amendment Bylaw. And so the actual request for a motion is that the committee refer the minutes to staff to allow for the recommendations to be considered for inclusion in the Animal Control Bylaw. So this, again, this goes back to,
Page 6.
Yeah. So all we're doing, if may it please the committee, is to refer the minutes to staff so that we can be put into a draft bylaw that will come back probably to this committee for consideration. So again, we're not approving the concepts or whatever. It's just that we're moving it on for consideration in the bylaw. So,
So moved.
Councillor Donaldson has moved the motion. Any second for this?
So I just want clarification on the process here. So the previous council tasked the Dogs and Metchosin Working Group to come up with recommendations. They've come up with these recommendations in addition to the other recommendations. They're asking this to come to this committee for comment, whether we want to comment, and that will be referred to staff to add those changes to that bylaw, and that bylaw will come back to this committee. Is that what you're asking?
Well, right now, I think all I'm asking is that the minutes that we approved go to staff for consideration into a new bylaw, into a revised bylaw that we will then have a look at.
Okay.
Yeah. And so there's a, Councillor Epp, second? You seconded the motion?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we have a motion on the table. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, can I have a motion, or I will call the question. All in favor? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so the Metchosin Municipal Grounds User Group, just quickly, I reached out to everyone before the new year and just mentioned that we will aim to have a meeting as early as possible in the new year. And again, I mentioned that Mayor Little has suggested that we look at a new name for the group, and it's, it sounds, I agree. The users group harkens back to, something maybe not so positive. So, I also want to mention that in the package there is the Metchosin Greenspace Community Survey, the Bufferland Survey. It's there for information. 24 people responded. I think their comments are fairly aligned and decisive. So, and again, all of this information will be added to the Bufferland engagement process, the employment process. Okay, we are through Councillor's update, and we next move on to correspondence. And we have 4 letters. And if I could, I don't know if I want to get too deeply into all of the letters, because I think we've talked at length about all of the topics. I will make sure that the correspondence does go to PTASC for further consideration, and again, brought back to council as well. The recommendations from PTASC will be brought to council. So I recognize with Weir's Beach there are some significant issues, and particularly around budget as well, and there's a long-standing right-of-way that needs to be respected there as well, on both sides, including the district. So, next letter is from Aneita Strauss. And Aneita, I hope I've addressed many of your questions, and there will be much more to talk about as well as we move along with the engagement process. Thank you. Okay. And the ACRM, and I do hear President Chris Moore's caution that we move expeditiously on the Bufferland engagement process. We'll try and do that without rushing the process. So, Michelle, thank you very much for your letter. It was right in depth, and we'll go back to it as well. Great historical information. So, okay, thank you. There are no bylaws and no other business. So with that, could I have a motion to adjourn? Councillor Dupree, and seconded by Mayor Little. All in favor of adjournment? Thank you so much, everyone.
I don't mind.
There's all my contact information, so just
So because we have a couple of presentations and I think a lot of people are here for Public Works, we've decided to switch it up and we will go ahead with our Public Works and Protective Services Committee meeting. So we'll start off. We have a couple of presentations. Two of our extremely hardworking volunteer community groups that really provide a tremendous service to our community. Can't even express how much these volunteers do for us. So anyway, we're going to start off with a presentation from the Metchosin Arts and Cultural Center Association with Chris, or who's doing it? So Chris, are you here?
I am.
So here we are. So just take it away.
Good evening. On behalf of the Metchosin Arts and Cultural Center Association, I extend our greetings to Mayor and Council. I'm Chris Vandewater, President of MACA, and I'm here to open our presentation. We will talk about our zero-based budget, management of the Arts Center, maintenance and repairs, events, and planning for 2023, and our wish list. I'm very proud to be a member of the board. We're passionate in that we're always questioning what we can do to have a positive effect on our community in the way of arts and culture. As arts and culture are becoming increasingly homogeneous across the entire continent, local arts and cultural centers are all the more important as a way for communities to recognize and encourage our individualism. I would like to meet our board members who make this happen. Gail Nash, Secretary Treasurer. Heather Hood, Vice President, she's not here. Betty Hildreth, Tenant Liaison. Charmaine Welch, Amanda Wilmhurst, and Nikki Nadeau, Directors. As well as Art Brendan, Past President and Volunteer Extraordinaire. What is zero-based budgeting? It's a method that allocates all of our income to expenses with the goal of having income minus expenses equals zero at the end of the accounting period. This type of budgeting works well for us and allows significant advantages for the district, such as simplicity and streamlining of building maintenance projects, made possible by MACA being able to circumvent some of the more onerous municipal pricing rules. I would now like to turn over the podium to Gail Nash, our Secretary Treasurer, to explain our budget for the current fiscal year. Thank you.
Good evening. As you can see from the first slide up here, this is the draft budget that formed part of our operating agreement with the district. It was enacted last February. It's a pretty basic one. At that time, it was just taking into consideration the income from the studio space we had. You'll see there's a 2001 DIY studio. At that point, although we've got a figure of a little bit in there, we had no idea how that new concept of having a community rentable space was going to work out. So it was just sort of a placeholder number. I'm happy to say that it's been a big success. We've exceeded all our expectations on it, so it's done very well for us. And the expenses at the bottom were what we estimated last year were going to be our costs. Not a complete balance, but it's pretty close. In this is the income portion of last year's budget that was passed at or I shouldn't say it was passed, it was approved by the members of the association at our annual general meeting last September. In the right-hand column, you'll see the figures that we estimated were going to be our income for this current fiscal year. And our fiscal year runs from July through June the following year. In the middle column, you'll see what our actual income has been so far in this fiscal period. So we're just about the halfway point now. In some things, we've acquired more income than we'd anticipated. Partly, you'll see we've got quite a good income from donations and things like that. We had a very successful open house in December and our Merry Makers Market, which did very, very well. So our income is better than we'd anticipated. Art, can you show the next one, please? This was, again, what we expected for expenses as of last year. In some things, you'll see that we've expended more than anticipated. Things like our maintenance improvements, for example, we're already at the halfway point. We've spent at least almost half of our budget for this year. We didn't expect 2 of the 4 furnaces, for example, to die, and MACA helped pay for the replacements for those. So it's been a little bit like shooting at a moving target through the pandemic period, of course. The economic circumstances have changed, and it's been very difficult to get us a good sense of how things were going to go that way. But this is what we're working on now. As Chris said earlier, we try to balance things as well as we can for income and expenses. Some years we've had a tiny deficit. This year we may have a small surplus. We don't know. If we get a surplus, we have a project account, and all of the money will be going into that to sort of hold for when we do have large projects, because there's always something major coming up in that elderly building. So like the furnaces and the front staircase that we had built, engineered and everything else a couple of years ago, that's where that little surplus goes into our slush fund so that we can help pay for those things later. The only other thing I wanted to mention is that not all of the space that MACA manages in that old part of the school brings us income. It's not all rented out as studios. Some of it is just sort of common space. And Charmaine was going to just show you a little bit about that. Thank you.
So I'll get your attention to this nice graphics here. So
Charmaine, speak right into the mic so the people at home can.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
So the graphic that we're looking at here, what you see in red is not income-based space that we're responsible for. So I'm no mathematician, but that's looking like about half of the building actually doesn't generate any income, but we're still responsible for the upkeep and the maintenance of those particular things. So what we have here is we've got in the middle of our space, we've got our little kitchen area that gets lots of use for life-giving coffee. The Seniors Resource Center is part of our area, but it also doesn't generate any income either. So what you're seeing here, these green bits on the graph here, those are our income generating. So these are our studios that we have rented out to the various artists that we encourage you to come and visit when we have our open houses. It's a phenomenal asset to our community to have these artists be part of our community and to open up their spaces to the public. And that's it.
So on maintenance by the volunteers on this old 1914 building takes a lot of time. Projects done in the past include, past year, new steel gutters and leaf guards that replace the old leaking and rusting gutters. Drainage is another problem that is slowly being remediated. With help from Public Works and a hired sewer camera, we determined that the perimeter drainage of the old schoolhouse drains into a collector sump out in the ditch by the Oak Grove. The camera and its locator determined that a child's ball is stuck in a low spot of the drainage line from the art center. Removal of the ball will require some pavement remover, digging, pipe cutting, etc. By the way, that ditch should be looked at so we don't have to look at it anymore. Picture that ditch there, right? And how about that front entry mural and restylized handicap parking sign? That's really something. That was really something. Art did that in the hottest 3 weeks of the summer. We installed security cameras inside. Arlo sees you, but you don't see Arlo. A big maintenance item was the new twin gas furnaces. We always thought the extremely uneven heating was the building's fault, but now that we have uniform heat throughout the building, we actually know that the furnaces have been on the fritz for years. And so on to volunteering. I know Mayor and Council have all done their fair share of volunteering in the past and continue to do so, balancing volunteering with family and work commitments. So without further ado, let's go over some of the things that the MACA volunteers do. Managing the daily operations of the center requires a significant amount of time. Leases must be written and signed with the tenants. There is organization and the hanging of art in the point of view hallway art gallery, which is always open to the public, by the way, free of charge. The staffing of our weekly Wednesday office hours, the planning and execution of community events, dealing with the myriad issues the tenants present to us, keeping the accounts up to date, liaising with the district, advising drop-in artists regarding their concerns, planning and debating the various building maintenance projects, and since 2020, dealing with the repercussions of the COVID-19 pandemic. As always, painting is an ongoing maintenance item, and we're fortunate to have professional painter Amanda Wilmhurst take the lead on this. But wait, there's more. MACA looks after ordering and restocking washroom supplies. In the hallways, track lighting was installed to highlight the art. Additional picture rails were put up over the improved wall surfaces, with the result that the hallway gallery looks really good. And check out our updated website. We had a lot of angst over this, but our overhauled website makes it much more user-friendly. And it is working well, thanks to Jessica, our website consultant. And it took years before we finally negotiated a service agreement with the district. So this was a very big deal for us in 2022. The agreement allows us to plan for the future, and for that we are so thankful. So thank you.
Before you leave, Chris, could I see this, through the chair, could I see the last slide on the ditch and the ball? I missed that.
The last which?
The slide that
Oh yeah,
showed.
it's got somewhere.
Sorry about that.
Go back.
Oh, there was one more
Slow.
on the volunteering.
Oh,
There's the ditch,
Yeah, that one.
top right. Let's see that roof, Art.
Hold on.
And I'll just say that I just want to, as far as volunteering goes, here's some of the stuff I did before Christmas. December 20th, shovel snow 2 hours. The ramp door was, on the main entrance. December 22nd, we got the tractor up there to plow out the ramp door. And December 22nd, the frozen water line to take care of. December 23rd, texting with the fire chief about the alarms that were going off and checking the alarms. December 24th, the Dow Studio roof started leaking. They cleared snow and ice from the roof. There's the roof that needs to be replaced at some point, I suppose. It's the last tar and gravel roof on the building. And so check the outside, some for flooding. And so, there's a lot of Santa Claus jokes about me being up there on Christmas Eve. That was pretty good. Anyway, there you go. Okay, thanks.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mr. Andy Mancris. So I'm going to speak about events today. So I think many of you who were in attendance, I think most of you, I see a lot of familiar faces, during our most recent MACA events, including Festivus, the September Makers Market, and the Very Merry Makers Market can attest that it felt like a breath of fresh air to gather again. Listening to live music, seeing children draw on the sidewalk with chalk, taste testing local yummy goodies, giving hugs to neighbors again, and taking photos together are something that we truly can appreciate after going through COVID for that long. Our hope is that through this artsy-fartsy volunteer group, that we can lead the way in fostering a new and creative culture here in Metchosin. A culture that offers an inviting, inclusive, and accessible environment for artists, makers, and patrons to come together and feel supported, encouraged, and welcomed. That being said, I'd like to just touch on our most recent Very Merry Makers Market. You can see some of the photos up here as an example of an event that we feel has provided great value to our community. So just a few highlighted points. In total, we had 66 vendor spots filled with a variety of wonderful local artists and makers ranging from the ages of 8 to 97. 17 vendors were from Metchosin, with the remaining vendors predominantly from East Souk and Souk. We were able to offer 3 fundraising vendor spots that supported Pearson College, and they were fundraising for the Kool-Aid Foundation International. With that also, there was All for World Relief and the Victoria Humane Society. We had 5 youth vendors attend. We also had 4 Indigenous vendors attend. On both days, we collected non-perishable food items at the door and were able to donate 4 full boxes of food to the Beecher Bay First Nation community cupboard. Vendors were asked to also make a donation if they were able to as part of their attendance entry, and with the understanding that that money would be given to a local community and arts in some way. We were able to generate, as Gail said, a substantial amount from those donations. People were very generous. And at this point, we've been able to take $500 of that and donate that to Hans Helgeson Elementary, specifically for art supplies. As we all know, schools do not get enough funding in that area. So we're really proud, and these points I bring up because from MACA's standpoint, we are super proud to offer that to our community, and I think we should shout that out as a big success for our past year. At MACA, we tend to dream big and definitely outside of the canvas. We look forward to what 2023 brings and have already started brainstorming sessions about the possibility of holding art camps, continuing with these markets, having film festivals, music presentations, and building stronger ties with our local Indigenous creators, with the hopes that our renovations stay on track and are done in a timely manner at the school. But those are just to name a few. The list could go on because we are big dreamers. We would love council support with all of these moving forward. And Betty is going to talk a little bit about our wish list.
All right, this is it. This is the end of it. As you can tell by the enthusiasm tonight, this is a benchmark for MACA. This is our first report to council since we got the contract signed. So after 14 years of operating as an association, MACA carries a continued sense of responsibility. We are pleased to now have this operating agreement as a guideline for service as a community facility. Our volunteers are now experts in the inner workings of this old building at 4495 Happy Valley Road. There is no corner left undiscovered, no rat's nests left undisturbed. Loads of materials have been recycled or reused or hauled away. New paint helps to protect the old walls. The inner workings have been updated, and the MACA-sponsored exterior staircase brands the building as a landmark in Metchosin. 6 years ago, we recognized the potential when supporting the purchase of the school site, and we have witnessed the slow and deliberate growth of the noble community effort. This is where the MACA mandate is focused and the service to Metchosin is embedded. MACA has earned trust and respect, and we are grateful for that. As stated tonight, the concept of a zero-based budget has been key to honoring our mandate in an open and credible way. So plans for the coming year, I've got a 4-point summary of the plans and a 4-point summary of our wish list. Plans, number 1, assist with the creation of a unified plan for the vitality of the community core. Number 2, help to ensure that the renovated gym and the playing fields remain accessible for public use. Plan number 3, build on connections with regional Indigenous artists. And number 4, network ideas with events amongst the fellow volunteer community organizations, as we did with the Festivus, when the theme, July 1st Festivus, when the theme was Wander the Village. And finally, MACA's wish list for 2023, again in a 4-point summary, but there's 2 sidebars. Number 1, wish number 1, install a platform lift to the 2nd floor. Number 2, work on programs for youth through ideas such as reviving the Mask Initiative. That was years ago. Through the community house, it was Metchosin Art School for kids, called it Mask. Wish number 3, continue to encourage not only the artists who are lucky enough to have the studio spaces, but also local artisans of all disciplines. And as Nikki said, we'll do this through the makers markets and public events. Now there's a sidebar here. I don't know if I should read this one. Okay. Perhaps consideration needs to be given to moving the annual $12,000 CRD Arts Grant back into Metchosin Grants and Aid budget. And finally, item number 4 on our wish list, to have clear and timely communication with our mayor, councillors, district staff, and fellow tenants within the old Metchosin Elementary School site. A site which just may be lucky enough to be given a new name and the requisite signage in 2023. That's it. Chris, did you want to say any more? No?
No, I just want to say thank you for hearing us out, and we look forward to working with you for the next year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. I know it was a lot of work to put that together, and it was really great for everyone to get here and at home to get a chance to hear all about what you've been doing. Thank you. Our next presentation is from the Metchosin Senior Association, another group that puts so much time and effort into helping, especially our seniors age at home. And before I continue with this, I need to backtrack. Won't make MACA repeat all their things, but I do need to actually get approval of the agenda, which I completely forgot about.
Motion to approve.
Thank you.
Motion to approve with the addition of the pink.
Right. All right. Could I have a seconder? Thanks. So it was moved by Mayor Little, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. All in favor? Thank you. All right. Now we can carry on. We have Helen Fletcher here to give a presentation for the Senior Association.
Thanks. I'm Helen Fletcher. My address is 4645 William Head Road. I'm Vice Chair of the Metchosin Seniors Association. First of all, I'd really like to thank Council and the community of Metchosin for the support we received. We are here today to submit our budget and our plan for 2023. And then we'll be back later in March. In March, we present to you our operating, the report of how we've done against our plan and how we've done against our budget. So we'll see you again in a few months. Our business plan for 2023 has 5 major themes that help us focus our resources and our energy. The first one is governance. And for each of these 5 areas, we have objectives, activities, measures, and lead delegates are identified. The plan is implemented, it's monitored for results, and actions are taken to address issues and areas of concern as they come up. The first area is governance, and the objective is to ensure that the Metchosin Seniors Association is operating the Metchosin Seniors Resource Center is a well-performing organization. Key activities include developing an annual business plan, reporting on the plan, and having processes in place so that expectations and responsibilities of the board and the manager of the center are clear. Our core services, the objective of this area is that the seniors benefit as a result of collaboration with the fire department and emergency operations center, that the center is open 16 hours a week, and that seniors are provided with information regarding services and support in a timely way. The third area is education, and the objective here is to offer programs that address needs that are identified by the community. The fourth area is networking to promote an intergenerational, age-friendly community. The objectives here are to identify, build, and sustain relationships with existing initiatives and activities in the community, and to model best practices of an age-friendly community. And the last area is communication, marketing, and fundraising. And the objectives here are to make sure that communications are aligned with our mandate and our plan, it is timely and consistent, and that the community is aware of the Metchosin Seniors Resource Center's services and activities. Our fundraising objective, as outlined in the service agreement with the district, is to recruit members and raise funds to support activities, programs, and events. Our budget for 2023 is almost identical to the budget for 2022. The small changes are we anticipate increase in revenue of about $640 from donations and membership, and our increased expenses are $1,600, and there's a small increase in the hourly contract, and that money was because we got more money from the Better at Home fund that allowed us to pay our manager what we wanted to pay her for a long time. Kim Schlepper is our treasurer, and she is here if you have any other questions about the budget. I'm happy to give them to her.
Right, does anyone have any questions of Helen or Kit? Probably good. I know, thank you for the report. I know the hours that your board puts in, calling vulnerable seniors, making sure they're all right, regardless of the weather, all through COVID, kept track of them all, and working for the fire chief to do a lot of real good and really help out a lot of lonely, needy people.
Right. And I think that I must acknowledge that we have so many resources in Metchosin that help us, the pod system, the fire chief, really good neighbors. Those are all the things, the churches that when we call some people and they're having a bad day, we say, well, who are you seeing? Almost people have somebody who's got an eye out for them, which is really incredible. And I really encourage you to come to the events that we put on and meet our seniors. Every second Wednesday we have a small meeting, and then the last Friday of every month there's a social at the community house, which our seniors come to, but so do other people who want to meet people in Metchosin.
Pardon, you have a question?
Yeah, I just have a question about finances for Kim.
Oh, okay.
I wanted you to come to the mic so it's recorded for the recording for the people at home. So the question, could you explain to the community the Better at Home program? I understand it's an Island Health initiative, and my question is, can we get more assistance from the Better at Home, because we have an aging demographic in Metchosin. According to our census, we are above the age in our demographics, and I'm just wondering how we can maximize that.
Well, I know we have requested more funding from the Better at Home program, but we have not yet heard back a response to our request.
Okay, and that is an Island Health program, right?
It's the United Way.
United Way.
But we will also look for Island Health. And the United Way, the Better at Home program explained to us that they're just starting their cycle for trying to get more money. And then we get it from them, right?
I see.
So, but we have submitted a letter.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Oh, okay. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on to public participation. Now there is...
I think Councillor Gray.
Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't see.
Well, I just want to say thanks to both MACA and the Senior Center for the tremendous work that they do, the richness they provide our community, and the Senior Center, the support provided is just terrific. Thank you all.
Here, here.
Okay, so we're on to public participation, and one of the items on our agenda tonight is a staff report on the Flesh Road Bridge. So Councillor Donaldson will be recusing herself for discussions on this. So,
She's just confused, yeah.
Pardon?
Public participation?
Just give me half a second.
Okay, you
So-
want to do that.
So if there's so if there are people here that are going to speak on the Flush Road Bridge item, we'd appreciate it if you could all come to the microphone first, so that Councillor Donaldson doesn't need to be running back and forth during public participation when she has to recuse herself. So is there anyone that does want to speak on that tonight? Okay, we do have a few, so, all right, she's gone.
Clear the room here. Good evening. My name is Brent Donaldson. Just for those folks in the audience, I'm Shelley Donaldson's husband, so that's the reason why she's leaving. Well, there's a little more to it. The item on the agenda tonight, for those folks in the audience, is Flesh Road Bridge. My name is Brent Donaldson, 4039 Chellister Court. Flesh Road Bridge is approximately 300 feet long, and it is off Happy Valley Road, and it's between Neil Road and Glen Forest. We've, as I mentioned, lived in the property that's at the end of that road, as well as we have frontage on Chellister Court. We've been there 34 years, and the report that's before council this evening, unfortunately, is misleading. With all due respect to Mr. Hurley, who is our contracting engineer, he didn't pull the file. There's probably 25 years of information just on this file because I have it with me, and to me, he has missed some key components. To add to that, the engineer's report from Herald Engineering was received by the district in September, and here we are 4 months later, so I don't know what's happened between now and then. Whether that was a political decision, I don't know. In the report, it refers to 4039 Chellister Court, and that is where I live. The roadway also services a neighboring subdivision, which has an emergency access off the end of that road. Last year this time, almost to the date, this topic was before council, and our former planner also didn't acknowledge the fact that Flesh Road also services emergency access to the High Mount Ferncliff subdivision, which to me is a key component. In the engineering correspondence for the last 3 years, the engineer also hasn't identified the fact that this particular road also services the subdivision behind us with the statutory right-of-way emergency access. So this emergency access is at the end of Ferncliff and exits onto Happy Valley Road. So for all folks that read this, or at home, or on the internet, or the World Wide Web, when they see this document, they're thinking that the road only represents our use, and that is just not the case. So that's unfortunate in my opinion. The document itself, it's fairly hefty, but I'm sure most of council is very interested in what the problem is with the bridge. The bridge was installed or refabricated and buffed up in 1979. So, and the municipality incorporated in 1984. In the meantime, the bridge has failed, and for the last, I believe it's 39 years, there has been no work done to the bridge. So here we are. There are two issues that are in front of council that are of interest to me, and certainly will be to the members of our community, is that there's a gas line and a Fortis gas line and a CRD water line that are connected to the bridge. Before council, there are 3 considerations, and they all represent a large sum of money. So I'm a taxpayer, I totally get it, and these figures will surprise you. To repair and remediate, which is fix the bridge, the total estimated cost is $240,000. To totally deactivate and remove the bridge, so basically there's nothing there, the estimated cost is $270,000. I believe that figure is low because according to the figures we have from Fortis, the gas company, their estimate, just their cost alone, is between $120,000 and $300,000. The other option is to leave the bridge the way it is and have it as a pedestrian cyclist bridge. The only downside to that is the report that the council has and the membership has here this evening, if you saw it online or you have it in your hand, is that is doing nothing to the structure. All that is doing is having handrails and monitoring it, the bridge, for the next 2 years. The downside to the monitoring process, the district has received reports almost on a yearly basis from Herald Engineering. And every year, for the last 15 to 20 years, there's been deficiencies. Nothing has been done. Nothing. So to me, I think it shows that somebody dropped the ball. And it certainly wasn't me. Although I do feel that I'm somewhat responsible because I'm asking council to consider allowing us to continue to farm, because that is our farm access. We bought the property knowing that there was access off Flesh Road, and we have a hobby farm and we raise pigs and sheep, and my wife has a horse. Any chance of being able to do any other activities, and Chris Vanderwater's here tonight, he's a farmer, there's no access for me to have baling or any sort of equipment like that from our house site. There's enough room to maybe squeeze a pickup truck, but ultimately our main access for our farming is off Flesh Road. It's level entry. We move our animals out there in the summertime. We have another farm in Metchosin, we move our sheep. Also, my wife has a horse. There's no way of getting the horse in and out in the summer months. This farm, and a lot of people use the term hobby farm, for us, we are not. A lot of folks in Metchosin just do the bare minimum for farm status, and we far exceed that. So this is a source of income for our family. Bear with me. Regarding the neighborhood emergency access, and there's differences of opinion on whether it's viable or not. My previous life, I was a career firefighter for 31 years for the District of Saanich, and I also was a volunteer with Langford when I was a young fellow. It's always been the second means of egress and access. So we all have a fire insurance, and we pay it every year. But this is the same as having fire insurance. If we feel confident that this bridge is not an important part of my neighbors who are here tonight for a wildfire, windstorm, anything along those lines, then I think if the vote is to exclude any sort of opportunity for fire apparatus to use that or evacuation, clearly is reckless. Worked on this all day. You think I'd be better organized? It has been suggested that some of the figures that I proposed tonight, the larger ones, could reflect up to a 7% increase in property taxes this year if that expenditure was done. Currently, repairs like this are not a capital expense. A capital expense would be something brand new. If there was no bridge there, we build a brand new one. That is a capital expense. So that would be something that would have impacts on our taxation. Rather, this has been a maintenance issue and lack of for the last 40-odd years. This is no different than paving roads or putting tires on our dump trucks. This is maintenance. I encourage council to have an opportunity. There was a second quote in from Main Road, which is a bridge building company up in Nanaimo. There is a quote and there was an inspection done in May. I certainly hope that you would have an opportunity to maybe look at that because certainly this is a huge issue for everyone in Metchosin, certainly taxpayers, so this is huge. I'll sum up here. I just ask that council recognize the fact that this has impacts on certainly our livelihood and our property. And I know a couple of my neighbors are here tonight just to speak on the fire access issue. It's taken us a year to get to here, so I'm certainly hoping that we don't rush into anything and make some foolish decisions that we haven't thought out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations to the new council. My name is Penny Ray Scher. I live at 995 Ferncliff Place. And as much as I deeply respect that Frank Donaldson does have a major issue with Flesh Road, I think the 30-some-odd homes that are on the other side of that road have even a greater issue. Livelihood's not, I don't mean to diminish that, but I have been in my home for 18 years now and have witnessed 2 fires. One, a wildfire behind the home across the street that required every municipality to send a fire truck. I quickly harried around the house taking photos while my husband watched the wind. Gratefully, that wind did not come, but the next year we had that heat dome. After that, Stephanie, our beloved captain of our fire department, has recommended roof watering systems, which I jumped on. Very risk adverse, very risk adverse. We have 2 egresses for fire. One, if the fire is coming from the bottom of Ferncliff, we can exit High Mount. If it's coming over the mountain towards us from the other direction, we're not getting out High Mount down to Happy Valley. I don't know what the risk is of having a pedestrian walkway closing out an egress for a fire, but I can assure you I'm not adverse to suing. I am actually, but my point being, there is risk there and a cost to the municipality if they don't maintain something that our subdivision was required to install to ensure the safety of the people in that subdivision. I did read Stephanie right that not all of our subdivisions have 2 exits, 2 egresses. But because my neighbor next door has 1 to leave their apartment, doesn't mean that because I have 2, I should close off one of my back doors and take away one of my fire extinguishers. I have an exit, mainly because I have a 40-foot motorhome. I would like to get it over that bridge. That'll be our life-saving. But it's also if I have to leave it behind because I have to take a 72, 74, 76, and 79-year-old that reside in my home and walk them over Flesh Road Bridge, I think is going to have a lot more liability than just the property damage that would be left behind. I'm seriously underwhelmed by the report, disappointed that only Brantford is important, but everything else was left out of the report to council. I don't know how to get it back in there or to tell you how adamant I am that this bridge needs to be repaired, maintained. We have like I say, it's like a fire extinguisher. You maintain it, you put more, feed it again, and you make sure it's where it needs to be. That was a requirement of our subdivision that this municipality required the developer to have. And I want to ensure that you maintain that requirement and put that burden back onto yourself to keep it. I'm not sure what I'm saying. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Rick Perron, Chalister Court. There's been a few items that have already been checked, but I'd like to check off everything else on my list to talk about the bridge. The cost, cost of repair is cheaper than removing it, and it's kind of a no-brainer, right? The reason for the bridge on one side is the gas line that runs along one side, and on the other side is the water line. And should that bridge disappear, then my understanding is that Fortis would end up going under Bilston Creek, which is an interesting thought that they'd go under a creek. Anyways, it has potential danger in there. So right now the bridge is protecting those 2 lines. So as for usage, it's part of my routine to walk that way. And there's this great loop I do, and the bridge is always part of my view, and I always look. And the bridge is supported on either side by Crown property, so it's not private property, so I can go that way and I can have a look at the water from a bird's eye view, and it's quite nice. I think it's a great bridge, always has been, and nice and wide. So that's from coming up Chalister, going through my backyard. But Neil Road residents, if they want to go to town, they're on the bicycles or pushing a baby buggy or something, they're not going to go down Happy Valley. The closest access to the Goose is definitely along over Flesh Road Bridge. It's a great way. And so of course the fire department has quick, easy access for it. That's it. Thanks. So,
thank you.
Thumbs up on the bridge.
Eric White, 4290 Metchosin Road. I think the issue with the bridge is cost, whether it's the cost of a lawsuit of if something does happen, or the cost of replacing the bridge or repairing it. But overall, I think the best way to deal with the bridge is to figure out who wants the bridge around the most and dump it for $1, and whoever says they want to keep it around will put the $1 up and take on the cost and the reliability of it.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anyone else that wishes to comment on that agenda item? Okay, I guess we could ask Councillor Donaldson to come back into the room. And yes, so please continue with public participation. Something else to talk about besides the bridge.
Morgan Blade, 5050 William Head Road. Nice to see you guys. While I'm standing here, thank you to MACA for the donation to Hans Helgeson. You're right, our art supplies are pretty sad state. We did a bulk order and it was not the quality that we had expected. So the kids have really gone without this year, so thank you. I'm here on behalf of the Hans Helgeson Parent Advisory Council. I think I've spoken with all of you at length over the past 5 years since I've been representing the parent body regarding road safety improvements along the Rocky Point corridor. I'm thrilled to see this council taking our concerns seriously and working it into both the budget proposal as well as the public works planning for this coming year. Because it has been so long, I just wanted to do a quick temperature check with the parent body. So on January 6th, I put a poll on our online parent group asking what they feel should be prioritized as far as budget planning for the road safety. And we had 80 members viewed the poll and 73 members cast votes. Of those 73 votes, 54% identified a painted crosswalk with some type of lighting as what they felt should be the highest priority, followed by 19% who felt that a roadside trail along Rocky Point would be the most valuable use of any budget. And then we did have smaller numbers saying that just a painted crosswalk with side-mounted signs would be adequate, and a painted crosswalk with a crossing guard was the actual last place, surprisingly. And I think that might have something to do with us finding out that we have to pay for it as part of the district. So we're taxpayers too. We do very much care about the safety. It's all about the safety of the kids. It's not about parking convenience, despite what some parents might be a little confused that that's what we're here fighting for. It's not about parking convenience. We're not going to ask the school to expand the parking lot. We already have one of the larger parking lots in the district. We do feel that a painted crosswalk would help the parents that are crossing with their children at pickup time just have a little bit more awareness from the traffic. But at the moment, there are 0 children crossing on their own because we do not have any other passage. There are no sidewalks, no bike trails, no connected to the Galloping Goose. Our children get to school either by bus or by personal vehicle. So at this moment, all children cross with parents. And I think as much as I would love to say that a $10,000 annual budget for a crossing guard would be welcome, and I'd be grateful to have that budget for us. I think there are more important things for the district to spend it on this time. So we would love to see, as the warrant, the urban systems warrant mentioned, that a painted crosswalk with side-mounted signs would be a great place to start. And then perhaps if that is not alleviating some of the concerns, then we could move on to maybe perhaps considering overhead lighting or other measures like speed bumps or whatever. And then also just hoping that we can still progress with the Parks and Trails Committee about perhaps enhancing the sidewalk, no, it's not a sidewalk, the shoulder of the road that people have to park on right now and try and walk on. I think that was it. I do just want to also say thank you to Councillor App for, this is your second term with this portfolio, and the efforts that you've made so far are greatly appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Public participation? No. Oh, there you. It's your turn now, Wendy.
I'm pretty sure I should have come before a report. I have, there's a microphone. Microphone? Can you hear that? I can't hear it. Wendy Mitchell, 580 Whitty Beach Road. I want to say congratulations to you all. It's nice to see you here. So, I've never met a meeting that I didn't want to come and talk at, right? And I don't really have anything to say. I do notice that you've changed the table, which I think is great. but we need to change the microphones. There's, well, at least I have gray hair. We need to be able to hear out here. Cannot hear. I have my hearing aids in. I have a nifty little thing that I can turn them up, and they're practically max right now. So I'm not sure, am I really yelling at you? It's hard for me to know. This isn't working, is it? Hello? Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Okay, because I can't hear it coming out of the thing, and I couldn't hear a word that the last gal was saying. So, that's my bitch for you. And Capital Daily also mentioned it too. Remember, they talked about you being the very worst of all the councils for listening. No, for hearing. So, I do have a question, Public Works. The road, the Metchosin Road from on the East Duke Road, where Briarwood is, so there's Briarwood Road out to Pelican Road, it's like, what is that? No man's land? Like, the potholes aren't fixed. There's no lines on the road. I mean, you always know when you hit Metchosin. My grandkids say this. Boy, you can tell when you hit Metchosin because the roads are smooth, except for that little bit. You have to pass the welcome to Metchosin sign. And Metchosin actually runs all the way right up to Far Hill Road, right? And so I think it must be Colwood going from East Duke Road up to Far Hill Road because there's lines on the road there and the road's nice and smooth. But from East Duke Road to Briarwood, who's dropping the ball there? And someone's been out blowing yellow plastic lines on the road yesterday or today. Metchosin crew, Metchosin truck, torching plastic onto the road. My question is, why is that little piece of road, why that 2 blocks, why is that not maintained like every other road in Metchosin?
I did ask about that, and the answer I got was that there was sort of a dispute about the actual area there as who was going to look after it. I don't know, maybe our interim CEO could enlighten us on that one. I don't know.
I'll have to check into that with the Public Works crew.
Yeah, and Colwood. I mean, it's pretty obvious. I mean, Colwood and Metchosin have always had a little bit of a thing, and it's just so obvious now. It would be nice to get over that, especially this winter. I was kind of hoping fresh lines. And then what's with plastic being blown on?
I don't know anything about plastic.
Yeah, talk Public Works. Thank you. It's great to see you. Happy New Year.
Hi, my name is Nikki Nato. I'm speaking on behalf of myself, but also as part of MACA. So in our presentation today, we brought up, in a very small referral, Betty brought up the CRD contribution that Metchosin currently makes and has been making for the past several years to CRD. It's a $12,000 contribution that is done annually, and it is specifically for the arts in our community. So this contribution, from what my understanding is, it's rarely used. So we're giving, that's quite a large sum of money to provide to the CRD. And what I would like council to perhaps discuss and well, actually move forward with is to step away from taking that providing that contribution to CRD and rather keep it in our community and use it in the same manner, so designated for arts, perhaps with MACA's input, as we are an arts association and have many things that with these funds we could host some of the events or some of the ideas that we talked about in-house. So I'm asking council to look at that. As it is an annual contribution, it does come up in January, so we're hoping that perhaps if this was an idea, we could step away from giving that money away for 2023 and keep it in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's something that I'll need to get on my next agenda for a discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, looks like that's it. So could be adoption of the minutes of November 21st.
So moved.
Second. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Donaldson, seconded by Mayor Little. All in favor? Okay.
27.
All right, we'll move on to the staff reports. Staff report on Flush Road. This is definitely a tough one, that's for sure.
Excuse me, Councillor.
Oh, I'm sorry, you need to.
I do need to recuse
You need to
myself.
leave again.
I do, as it is a concern in my neighborhood. So I declare this.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Chris.
I don't know why there's always a mass exodus during my meeting.
It's not you.
Okay, well this is, as I said, the Flush Road, the bridge is really, it's a very tough issue, so we would really like to hear council's comments on this. Very little.
Okay. We heard tonight, and certainly from my own personal experience, we don't have full disclosure here. There's a number of missing reports. There's a number of missing reports. There's also an engineering report from 2021 I would have liked all of council to see. There's the reports, the yearly reports from Herald Engineering, as well as the main bridge quote. So I'd like to make a motion that the committee postpone a decision on the Flush Road Bridge pending further information from staff. The next Public Works meeting is February 13th, the committee meeting. So if they can gather that information in a package for council and the public to see, I'd like to recommend postponing this decision. That's a motion.
I will second that for discussion and just like to make a few comments as well.
Okay.
Okay, so thanks very much. There are two questions that come to mind around this issue. And the first one is there a public good that is served by this bridge and the road itself? And then companion question is, what is the appropriate amount to spend on that public good? And you know, those questions can be applied to any number of issues and aspects and projects in the district. Around the public good, I think the answer is yes. There definitely is a public good that is served. So the bridge and road, they're used by pedestrians. The bridge fortifies a water line and a gas line that are used. And the secondary egress way, now I was not fully aware of this early on. I've been following this issue for some time. And I full disclosure, I did do a walk with Mr. Donaldson on Sunday, and he showed me the area. The one place I was not aware of is the right-of-way that crosses the adjacent property to Mr. Donaldson's. And that does very much allow for that secondary access point from the High Mount Ferncliff area. So very much there is a public good there. The complicating thing is that there is also a significant use by the private property owner as well. And so the bridge is used to transport hay and livestock, as Mr. Donaldson has said, and there's other uses should the property be subdivided. So there's an intermingling of private and public interest with this bridge. So that to me presents some challenges. The one thing that is very clear, though, is that the maintenance of this bridge was called for many, many times, and there appears to be nothing done. But just in support of Mayor Little's motion, I do believe that there's another level of information that we could use before we make a decision on this one. So there's a few things that I might identify as, so what is the risk level of the bridge right now, particularly in terms of load? So the Herald report states very clearly that load evaluation or rating wasn't in the scope of the report. However, there doesn't seem to be an issue with pedestrians or cyclists. Looking at the long term though, if that bridge is to be used for pedestrians or cyclists, or even the occasional pickup truck, is that viable? So what is the load rating and what is the risk of that diminishing over time? So that's a piece that might be interesting as well. The other thing is, are we actually on the hook for the cost if there's a decommissioning for those water lines and gas lines? So that was assumed in the Herald report, but that would be good to clarify. Are we on the hook if there's a change to those two utilities for the expenses there? The other thing is, are there further options in terms of repairs to the foundation? That's something that would be interesting. Mr. Donaldson mentioned the report from the survey, I forget, the main line. Is there something there to be looked at? Are there cost sharing opportunities? Perhaps even ones that involve the utility, the landowner, and the district. And again, I go back to that intermingling of private and public interests around this road. And looking again, are there ways of addressing potential liability issues? So I don't know if the word indemnification might be used, not the word, but the concept between the private landowner and the district. So I guess I'm supporting Mayor Little's motion, and with that, with more information, I wonder if there are options that we might explore in terms of addressing this, whether it's cost sharing, or again, options in terms of the actual foundational fix, the physical fix that seems to be needed. So I speak in support of the motion that Mayor Little has put forward.
Councillor Gray.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll speak in support of the motion as well. I'm struck by the high cost, obviously, to maintain and or remove the bridge. I'm wondering about the legal basis, around the responsibility of paying for Fortis's changing its hardware. And if we get clarification on that, that would be a help. I'm also thinking about, we're engaging in developing a climate plan for Metchosin, and as we do that, we're going to be looking around and expect all around Metchosin at the infrastructure we have in terms of culverts and bridges and things, and how well they can withstand future flood events and that kind of thing. And so I'm kind of interested in the issue of where does this fit in terms of priorities, and costs. If we have a whole lot of things coming in soon and surveying the community, where does this one fit? So I'd be interested in that. It can't be answered quickly, but it's a concern of mine to see where this would be in a priority list. And then finally, I wonder about the opportunity for grants to assist with the payments. That, of course, it's an opportunity cost. If we use a grant for this, we don't get to use the grant for something else, but that's another point of interest for me at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, those are lots of really valuable points. If we do move this to the next meeting, we'd also need to include the report from last year by the fire chief on the emergency use of it as an emergency access, which she at the time does not feel that the fire department would be using it as an emergency access point, but it's something we can revisit and look at again. All right, so.
Sorry.
Sorry.
And thank you. Also, some of the answers to your questions, both Councillor Shukin and Councillor Gray will be in the 2021 engineers report that wasn't here. So some of those questions are answered there. And I think you have an important point with climate action, and one might beg to argue that infrastructure such as this that provides egress is an important part of our climate action. It was a part of the subdivision approval. I don't know how legally we would get around that. And it would provide, I think, significant liability to the district if we were to close that and if there was a major event. I also want to point out something that is sort of logical. If you look across Canada, which municipality is closing down infrastructure, I don't know how much, I can't remember the figures, $2 to $4 million infrastructure to save on costs. That's so illogical to me. But I would like all of you to be able to see what I've seen. And that's why I put forward the motion. This council, and me in particular, have committed to full disclosure. And I think it's important to be transparent with everybody. And that's why I moved the motion.
There are a couple of legal questions that have been brought up. So if we could possibly also contact our legal advisors to find out about that agreement as far as the emergency egress of the bridge, and also the other agreement that the Donaldsons had with the district as far as the access road. So with that,
yeah, I just want to support what you're saying, Councillor Epp, that seeing as we've raised the issue of legal liability, we should find the answer, get the answer to that question.
Okay, unless there's any more comments, can we have a vote? Are we all in favor? Okay, all right, well, that passed. Thank you.
Sorry, I can't really just get Charlie back.
All right, so next we'll move on to the report on, excuse me, on the safe passage at Hans Helgeson School, which we've been looking into for a long time. And anyway, so this is about the funding for a safe crossing. The recommendation is that the committee recommend council support the grant application, which is for the BC Vision Zero and Road Safety Grant Program. So support the grant application by way of resolution for the grant application as summarized in this below in this printout, and authorize the interim CAO to execute the agreement related to a successful grant application.
I'll second that.
Great. Any discussion on that? Councillor Gray.
I think it's a great idea. Good work getting this far along. I just wanted to ask a question. It seems that we'll lose some or all of the convenient parking along Rocky Point Road if we proceed. Is that your understanding there? And then we'll be increasing parking, I guess, on Windover, which seems okay. And my last question was just about, well, it was already mentioned about the crossing guard. We saw that in our budget a week ago or so. But I'm noticing here it's described as optional. So if we go ahead with this, we're not necessarily looking at that question. We're looking at getting the crosswalk itself done, correct?
Yes, Liz is always going to cover that in my councillor's update. But so we had, based on a report, we had an urban systems road safety study done a while back. And they did recommend at the time, we were looking at crosswalks at the Goose crossings and also at Hans Helgeson. But at Hans Helgeson, they recommended that we get a warrant, which is basically a Canada transportation guide to whether or not a crosswalk is actually warranted. And a lot of the delay that's happened over that, having a crosswalk or not having a crosswalk, is the concerns about liability issues. And it's been previous councils and staff been quite reluctant to talk about a crosswalk because of the liability. So we felt that getting, and this, we have been listening, if not taking much action, but anyway, we did decide that getting an actual official warrant on there would really help in the future to cover the district for liability, because we could say, we've done due diligence on actually looking into it. So just before Christmas, we had Urban Systems actually did this warrant, and there is information on it in the package. And so they recommended, given the volume across there, they recommended that there be a crosswalk along there with the proper considerable road markings as well as signage there. They didn't recommend a lighted crosswalk because they didn't feel that the amount of traffic going across there during school pickup and drop off times really was warranted. We talked about a crossing guard just because just thinking that might be a safer route. So that's why it is in the budget. I spoke to ICBC, and they are covering 50% of the cost of the warrant that we had done. So that was $7,000. So they're going to be funding half of that. They also said that since we did have that official warrant, that they would cover 50% of the crosswalk. Following that, we got notice about the Vision Zero grant, and which also came through the school board. So figured, well, we might as well go for that, and that gave us another option. So hopefully we would get the grant of that would cover the whole cost of the crosswalk and the signage. If not, we'll go through ICBC to get their contribution, and then put the extra money also to push. I'm actually planning on pushing to have the crossing guard as well as enough money for the crosswalk in the budget. And then if we get the grant money, then that'll just be a bonus.
Thank you.
So that's pretty much all I say about that.
Councillor, do you recall the cost of the actual crosswalk itself? And we're talking mainly about painting and some signage? Sure.
We figured I don't have a quote yet. I did ask for a quote on the road signage. It depends what kind of paint is used, but we figured that it would be something in the nature of about $15,000 probably. That's kind of a ballpark figure about what it would cost for the painting and the extra signs. And as far as the parking goes, they did recommend in the warrant that on the approach to the crosswalk there be a 15-meter no parking zone, because they felt that the cars parked along the side of the road as well as the cars parked in the bus stop really limited the vision there, which obviously they do. And so, and on the other side, on the non-approach side, it would be 10 meters. So that would definitely cut down on the ability for people to park along the side of the road. So our engineer has also recommended that we try to add a little bit of extra room where we can for cars to park along there.
Thank you.
Marilyn?
Yeah, I appreciate the comments from the representative from the Helgeson, and it's not that I'm not listening to you, but I feel more comfortable spending the $10,000 for a crossing guard, because there will be more traffic across that crosswalk, and it will afford learning opportunities for both the children and the parents regarding safe crossing. As I understand, we're the only district that doesn't have crossing guards here. When we spoke to Ravi Parmar, the chair of the board, they were quite amenable to future suggestions and how to egress through the parking lot. So they want to work with us on that. So we are talking, Councillor Ebb, myself, our interim CAO met with Ravi Parmar and their engineer recently in the last couple of months. And so I hear you that as a taxpayer, we don't want to spend money needlessly. And I agree, except for when it comes to risk and safety, I'm very risk adverse. And so especially for the first few years, while there is a crosswalk there, the learning opportunities, the education is an important point for me, both with the parents, but most of all the children.
Thank you. One other reason that we were really thinking about a crossing guard, and it is our option to put a lighted crosswalk there as well. But given the problems that we have had with the solar lights on the rest, like the radar signs and the flashing school zone signs, Public Works spends considerable time charging those batteries because of the darkness and the tree cover. And so I know, just for me, I was thinking about that and thought, well, I'm a bit worried that if we had a solar-powered lighted crosswalk there, that it might not work all the time, and then people would be thinking the lights are going to work and they don't work, and so that was kind of another pro in favor of actually having a live person there who wouldn't have to blink out if it was dark. All right, any more comments on? Okay, so call a question. In favor of the recommendation? Thanks, that's great. All right, and we do have, we do have the urban systems report there, and I will accept we had correspondence from Isla Zilak and from Larissa Juby that we will also referring to the crosswalk issue, so thanks for those letters. So my councillor's update now, in my usual organized fashion, I dropped my whole fistful of papers before I left home, and of all the papers that are missing, it was the one I had all my notes on. Anyway, I will try to wing it. So as far as the Councillor's update, I'll just keep it brief. Public Works, the update is from before Christmas, so obviously we know we had that massive snow, and our small crew did an amazing job with the help of some auxiliaries. I know I drove, after the snow and the mess, I drove into downtown Victoria to volunteer at our place for the lunch, and honestly, that was absolutely dreadful. There was roads blocked with stuck vehicles all over, and I parked in a snowbank, and I was really glad I had four-wheel drive to get out of there. Sidewalks weren't cleared, and it was a mess. And we have a son living in Saanich, and they live on the top of a hill, and their road never did get plowed. So our crew is really something special. As far as the school, the floor has been sanded and looks absolutely unbelievably fantastic. People were just not going to believe how great it looks in there. And Art Brendan, who is here with the MACA group, is going to repaint the whale that was in the middle. So we have a little bit of history from the old school days. It's going to be in the center of the gym floor. So that's very exciting. That should be done by the end of February. I'd say the floor will be done. The acoustic panels to go on are being built as we speak, and most of the sound system has been collected. So school is getting there, and we are next we'll be looking into the renovation for the kitchen and the construction of the washrooms. I think that's pretty much all I have for my council's update. So if we need just about time, we could get out of here. At least move on to the Environment Committee. Thanks for letting me go ahead of you. I could have a motion to adjourn, please.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved by Councillor Little, seconded by Councillor Gray. All in favor? Thanks. What did I say, Councillor? I said Councillor, I meant Mayor. Yeah, it was bound to happen sometime.
That was my risk.
We're working on something over there. Get it going.
I can see that various people are leaving us just fine, but maybe we'll get going because of the time. So I'll call to order the meeting of the Environment and Natural Areas Committee. Today's Monday, January 16th. I just want to acknowledge that we're meeting on the territory of the Shanna First Nation. We've been here for countless generations, taking care of the land and sea that we now enjoy, and I'm grateful for their stewardship. So we have an agenda before us. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda?
So we have the pinks. That's the councillor's update, agenda item 7B.
Great. If I can have a motion to adopt the agenda with the amendment of the addition of the pinks.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councillor Donaldson and seconded by Councillor Epp. All in favor? Thank you. And then, given the time, it would be advisable to have a motion that we continue the meeting after 10 p.m.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Moved by Councillor Shukin, seconded by Mayor Little. All in favor? Passed. Thank you. We have no presentations tonight, but public participation. Would anyone like to speak this evening? Thanks for coming forward.
Okay. So Alison Leduc, 1094 Darien Place. Just very quick, because this is late. I just wanted to correct a mistake in my December 16th letter that is part of the agenda for this evening. So most, if not all, of the freighters that anchor off Metchosin, sorry, this is about the anchorages in my letter, are waiting for a berth at the Port of Vancouver, but they are not assigned by the Port of Vancouver. I found out just recently that so the Port of Vancouver assigns ships to the 28 anchorages within the Port of Vancouver itself and the 33 anchorages around the Southern Gulf Islands. But here, for the Royal Roads anchorages, it's actually the Department of National Defense that acts as the port authority for the Esquimalt Harbor, and they manage the Royal Roads anchorages. So there's 5 Royal Roads anchorages, and then there's also supposed to be 5 Constance Bank anchorages, and those are managed by the Pacific Pilotage Authority. So I've requested clarification about why the groups of anchorages are managed by 3 different bodies. I haven't so far received much information about that. Also wanted to clarify that the container ships that carry consumer goods back and forth, they rarely anchor out. It's for some reason the port seems to be able to process them within about 2 days. So any anchorages would be within the Port of Vancouver itself, not out here and not in the Southern Gulf Islands. So the root problem with the anchorages seems to be the inefficiencies related to the arrival and loading of cargo ships, primarily coal and grain freighters. And the last point, which is that I think it is important that the question of anchorages be referred to MEASC now, and hopefully a resolution submitted to AVIC by the February 9th deadline, because the more I learn about this, the more it seems that the residents of the Southern Gulf Islands and Islands Trust and even the MPs for that area have been lobbying hard for years to get rid of the 33 anchorages in the Southern Gulf Islands. One of the options that seems to be coming up is to put more of them in our water. So I think that it's a really good idea that we kind of get moving on this and talk to other coastal communities about what can be done, because it really does seem to be an efficiency issue with the Port of Vancouver that it, I've submitted information about this to MEASC, but other ports elsewhere in the world have been able to reduce or eliminate the need for anchorages because they've increased their efficiency and their port optimization. So, okay. So those are just my points. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Any further public participation? Great, we'll carry on with the agenda then. The next item is adoption of minutes, the Environment and Natural Areas Committee meeting November 21, 2022.
Move adoption.
Thank you. Moved by Mayor Little and seconded by Councillor Epp. Any discussion? We'll call the question then. All in favor? Thank you. No opposed. We don't have business arising, but we have a staff report on climate action plan options. Oh,
Sorry.
Tina.
Just received the minutes from the ask November 22.
Oh, excuse me. Thank you. We have received minutes from the Environment Advisory Committee, November 22.
Move receipt.
Did you say
Me, it was me. Move receipt.
We really want to go fast here. Okay, Councillor Shukin moved the motion. Councillor Donaldson second. All in favor? Passed. Thank you. Okay, so then we move to the staff report, climate action plan options. So I think everybody knows the history here. The previous council was working on having a climate action plan developed, and that was under the aegis of Councillor McKinnon and our planner at the time, and now Catherine Leisham. And Pinna Consulting was working on that. That climate action plan would have been solely to deal with greenhouse gas emissions. And with the new council coming, we asked them to hold on the public survey that was going to be launched just around the time of the election or just after the election, because we were interested in the climate action plan, the council you see here tonight. We discussed it informally. We were interested in seeing more than just greenhouse gas emissions being looked at in the community, but also adaptation measures. Our planner then discussed that after our election with Pinna Consulting, and Pinna Consulting has come back with three options. One is carry on with the work they were doing before to limit only to greenhouse gas emissions plan, reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from Metchosin. The second option is to look at adaptation measures, but do that generally a book process. Go and look at what the CRD's done, go and look at what other people have done and give us a report like that. The third option was to do the book work in terms of what's out there, but then have a meeting, workshop, as what happened previously around the greenhouse gas emissions that they had led in council chambers, but talk about adaptation. So it'd be more specific, and our public would be involved in that. Both ourselves and the public would have an option or an opportunity to discuss those options. You can see the prices there. It turns out I don't think there's the additional cost to complete the action plan as they previously planned. To revise it, but not have a community consultation portion, that would be $2,800, and then revise it and include adaptation, $3,920 plus GST. So I open the floor for discussion or motion.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. I am prepared to make a motion on to adopt the most comprehensive option presented. However, before I do that, if someone beats me to it or another motion, I'm just curious and have a question in terms of doing this in light of our unresolved budget.
Yes, I think the point here is to point us in that direction, and then maybe we could ask our administrator how we would deal with that. It's also in the budget process, so.
So if, through the chair, so if council chooses to go ahead with the most comprehensive option, which is additional $4,000, that'll just be, so only the $4,000 will be built into 2023 budget, because the $10,000 is the budget for 2022.
Okay, thank you.
So we would be approving that money tonight.
No, you're making a recommendation to council.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. I would move that the Environment Committee recommend to Council to adopt the most comprehensive option presented tonight. I wouldn't mind speaking to this one through.
Great, a seconder? Councillor Donaldson?
Thanks very much. I think that this is money well spent. As much as we have to watch our costs at this point, I personally had huge reservations about allocating any money to PINA when this first came up in the spring of 2022. And the reason was that there seemed to be nothing that really engaged the community. And without knowing the word at the time, adaptation, there was nothing in the report that I'd seen, from Highlands as an example of the work PINA did. Mm-hmm. There was nothing to engage the community and look ahead in terms of action we could take around responding to climate change and resilience matters. So I do believe that this is money well spent, not only to point us in the right direction, but also to engage the community as well. You know, whether we do that directly through PNR or ourselves, that might remain to be seen. But so I'm in support of this motion. Clearly.
Thank you. Councillor?
Well, I'll go with the rest of council. The original PINA, I certainly believe in, the climate action plan and so on, but I didn't find when we had the representative come and, sort of lay it all out for us, it didn't seem like there was anything really earth-shattering about it. It didn't seem to me that there was anything really that we couldn't have found out pretty easily. There's been so much written about climate and plans and so on, and I don't know that, nothing really struck me about that as being something that I didn't already know. It was just kind of all put together. And I'm wondering if spending the extra money on the adaptation would be the same thing if it's been done in the CRD and in other municipalities, maybe the Highlands. I'm just wondering how anything done in Metchosin would be so uniquely worth spending that money on that we don't sort of already know. I guess that, I don't know enough about it, but I think it would be worth it if we think they can come up with things that are really pertinent that we can't sort of fairly easily find out from looking at other areas. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say that I think it's not dissimilar to some of the other plans that we've seen or looking at. I'm thinking now that the work gets done in one community, and then I'm understanding the cost of this is probably the way it has been. The $10,000 originally was because we have a contractor who's taking work done elsewhere and then modeling it to our community. So it's not terribly expensive to get done in terms of hours put in. I think that's what's going on. I think we'll see a similar thing with the agriculture one, where we have already examples in Salt Spring Island and we've got examples in Squamish. And so the contractors will use existing information but pull it together for us. And perhaps part of the value here is, as Councillor Shukin's saying, is having the community involvement. Other comments, Mayor Little?
Yeah, thank you for that. My comments, I'm in favor of either option 2 or 3. I'm in favor of option 3 because it would allow the 3 new council members to talk to the consultant. And so you've only heard or you've only read what was on paper. You weren't afforded the same opportunity that Councillor Epp and I were. For one thing, we're not going to spend a great amount of that time denying that there's a climate change. So that time is going to be well spent within that 2 hours. So I'd like you also to hear what we've heard. But I do have a question. A difficult question, but I just wanted to ask you. So in terms of tangibles about the adaptation, can you give me some specific Metchosin examples of what we're dealing with, or are we asking for something pie in the sky? I think it would be good for members at the table, but also community members to hear what we mean by adaptation and a possible tangible.
Sure. Well, I mentioned one earlier tonight, and that's the culverts and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can expect to have more atmospheric rivers, that kind of experience that we've already had. I'm imagining a number of years ago, Bilston Creek had 3 culverts put in, extra culverts put in, at Glenelg 4. I'm wondering now, is that going to be 5 or 6? What kind of pressure is that going to take?
Mm-hmm.
So that would be on the flooding side of it. On the other side, we had our fire chief here at our last, at council meeting, talking about the initiatives that she's wanting to take through another process to deal with the fire risks and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So I can see that it's kind of odd in a way. Too much water or too little water are kind of big things coming our way. I can imagine that we might also discuss through the agricultural plan the idea of impounding water in different places in Metchosin, so we have access to water in the event that. I'm a little bit curious. Are we actually now just said we could have floods coming soon? Well, maybe we're not going to get much more rain this winter. Mm-hmm. What will happen in our farming community if that were to occur? So I think it's that sort of forward-looking. Those are a few examples. It's not much that I have to offer now, but that's part of the reason of asking for some people to come and give us a hand with it.
If I may?
Yeah, certainly.
I think we all agreed that we didn't want a cookie cutter approach. We didn't want to have the Highlands Climate Action Plan with reversing out the word Highlands for Metchosin. So I would really encourage that all of council be able to discuss, this new council discuss with the Climate Action team.
Thank you. Councillor Shukin?
Sorry, one other example about adaptation measures are invasive species, and particularly like things like Scotch broom that are so flammable. And again, it's to maybe put more emphasis and an understanding as to why we're at risk if you allow your property to be overrun. So just as an example.
Okay.
And we'll marry it with the greenhouse gas emission discussion that's already taken place. Great, we'll see no more discussion. Maybe we'll move to the question. All in favor?
Of
the motion was?
Well, that council adopt the most comprehensive option presented in
so
terms of
option 3.
Pena's, option 3. Yeah.
And we'd be recommending that to council. So all in favor? And none opposed, thank you. The next item on the agenda is by councillor's update. The first item we've dealt with, which is the Climate Action Plan. The second item was in relation to the Western Canada Marine Response Corporation. Now, I'm not sure actually how many times this group has come, but once anyway, maybe twice from my reading. At a previous workshop, the one on July 18th of 2022, Michael Lowry, who was one of the officials with WCMRC, gave a workshop and talked about areas of the shoreline that were sensitive and that should be protected. There was some feedback provided to him, and he offered to return and speak again. And so Miask, we talked about that and brought it forward. The idea that there should be another workshop. We've contacted Michael Lowry, and he's interested in coming. His one comment was he'd like to come and speak to council again. The concern here is that the areas they've identified as sensitive don't include all the sensitive areas of our coastline. Some of us would argue the entire coastline is sensitive, but we'd like to have that discussion again with him. My proposal here is that the Environment Committee recommend that council ask me to provide a summary of the pertinent issues. We're all new, or not all of us, but some of us are new to the table. And we get the pertinent issues, the takeaways from that workshop, and that would prepare us to have this meeting with WCMRC. So we basically have the cheat notes. He's asked that at that particular meeting, it not be a lot of public participation in the form of questions and answers that he's got to deal with. And so what we're thinking about, and I've been talking to our staff about that with Tina, about the idea of structuring it to emphasize the committee itself, MCRC, and then one or two people from Miask as the people to carry on the discussion. That's not to say there wouldn't be public participation to begin, as all of our meetings do begin. But if people are interested in that, we would proceed if there was a motion to that effect.
I would move that the Environment Committee recommend that council ask Miask to provide a summary of pertinent issues, the takeaways from the July 18th MRC workshop, and the recommendations concerning the upcoming workshop.
I'll second that.
A move by Councillor Shukin, seconded by Mayor Little. Any discussion? Maybe I'll call the question. All in favor? Great, thank you. That's passed. The next thing I just wanted to mention in passing was the Maryhill website. I think we've heard about the Maryhill, many people have, about the Maryhill Indigenous Protected Area vision, and there's quite a bit of interesting material on the website put together by the Shannon First Nation, and so I recommend people take a look at that. And that council continue to refer people there for information. The fourth issue to discuss this evening was the Anchorage issue that Alison Leduc spoke to during public participation. We have received a number of representation from community members about the environmental impact and the shoreline risks associated with ship anchorage just off our coast here, either further down or getting closer possibly. And those representations have argued that if we improve the efficiency of the traffic flow, we may be able to reduce adverse impacts on the coast here and the risks that we see. So we've already got a plan to pick that up at MEASC on January 24. The difficulty in terms of the meeting way things are set up, our thought is that MEASC may decide, by looking through the materials, to bring forward a draft resolution for the Association of Vancouver Island the Coastal Communities at the AGM. And in order to do that, I'd like to seek permission or see if the Environment Committee would recommend to Council that they take a look at MEASC's report and recommendations if there is a resolution in there at Council's January 23rd meeting. So kind of changing the process a little bit. Mayor Little.
Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify. So what you're asking is for MEASC to review this. They would come forward with a draft resolution, but the resolution would come from Council, right? So it would come to Council, for Council to send as a resolution for perusal at the Association for Vancouver Island Coastal Communities, right?
Yeah. And we'd the Environment Committee would step out of the way. So go directly to Council from MEASC.
Right, because of the timing of January 23rd, whereas MEASC is meeting on the 24th.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I get a motion to that effect.
I can make the motion. I would move that the Environment Committee recommend that Council agree to consider any MEASC report and recommendations on Anchorage at its January 23rd meeting. And just a quick comment after.
Second.
So motion by Councillor Shukin, seconded by Mayor Little.
I just want to pass on thanks to Bev Bacon and Alison Leduc for raising this issue and then providing supporting information. And I have to declare complete ignorance on the issues associated with this. And whether flying, you would just look at the ships peacefully sitting in the water. And meanwhile, I think Alison had mentioned the chains dragging on the ground below. It's I think this is a significant issue and one I was just more and more aware of. So thank you.
Great. Any more input, Mayor Little?
Yeah, actually, I was thinking about this more over the weekend, and I thought, why shouldn't we have a say? We're our community, the 75 kilometers of coastline, we stand at risk the most. If something happens to one of those containers that are anchoring there, and over the weekend I thought, why don't we have a say? And so I think that would be probably a contentious resolution at AVICC, but that is the Association for Vancouver Island, island being the operative word, coastal communities. So I think it's a very good idea. And thank the community members that brought it forward. Thank you.
Great, so we'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Passed. The next item is just to report back the United We Stand for Old Growth Forest Declarations. Council had seen that on November 14th and referred it to MEASC. MEASC took a look at it on November 22nd, advising Council to sign the declaration. I can update people that the United We Stand for Old Growth Forest rally is scheduled for February 25th, starting at noon at Centennial Square, perhaps now called Spirit Square. And a contingent from Metchosin is being organized to attend. They've got about 160 organizations now from across BC who signed on, including the Climate Caucus network of municipal elected leaders. And so I'm just looking to send it back to Council at the January 23rd meeting to consider signing the declaration again. Councillor?
I'll recommend that that Council at its January 23rd meeting again consider signing the United We Stand for Old Growth Forest Declaration.
Thank you. A seconder?
I will second for discussion.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Epp and seconded by Councillor Shukin. Councillor Shukin?
I have to unfortunately, because this meeting's gone so swimmingly tonight, I don't want to throw wrenches in, but I cannot support the resolution. But depending on how the vote goes, I would like to discuss Metchosin and the district submitting our own letter to government on this issue, and also exploring this issue by way of a resolution to AVICC, which I had mentioned previously, and I am happy to draft, and I aim to have something by in the next 7 days anyway. So I cannot support the resolution, but I believe that the issue is important, and I want to recommend some steps that Metchosin can take on its own terms. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shugan. I guess we sort of promised to the public we'd bring it back to council. So you're saying you wouldn't support it at council, but tonight you're okay to send it to council, just so I'm clear?
Okay, well, I cannot support Metchosin signing on to this declaration, as sympathetic as I am to the issue. I would rather spend our time and attention focus on the letter that Metchosin could write on this issue to government.
Mayor Little?
Thank you. So here we disagree, which is okay. I think it's always great to have a fulsome conversation, and we can agree to disagree. So the reason why I stated that I would not support it, and I won't support this going to council, is because I'm making a great deal of effort to try and forge relationships, not only with the provincial government and the federal government, but also with our community partners. This is a heavily charged, politically charged letter. It's also talks about Horgan's government, where it's no longer Horgan's government. It's the government of the day. David Eby is the premier now. It's just heavily charged and political. I just don't think it bodes well for this municipality to start off this administration by ticking off the provincial government in this way. What I would suggest is I would appreciate Councillor Shukin's suggestion at the last meeting to write our own letter that can be very respectful, but very abrupt about what we expect and our expectations of the provincial government for their obligations and what they've committed to. That's what I would prefer to do in a more diplomatic, respectful, but also a more fulsome letter that is directed towards, that is fulsome of Metchosin's interests. And that's why I won't support this motion going to council or at council.
Thank you, Mayor Little. Councillor Epp?
Well, I will support it because I feel that there has been letter after letter after letter, and just about everything in between, written about old growth forests that really hasn't gotten anywhere. There's been numerous resolutions at the AVICC and at the UBCM about it, which don't seem to have too much effect either. So I think this group, while it is a bit politically charged, I think that to actually get some kind of action eventually on the old growth forest issue, that we do need to push the envelope a little bit, and I think supporting this group and what they're doing might be finding a way to actually get the government's ear long enough to have them do something about it definitively.
Councillor Donaldson?
Yeah, I'm also not going to support putting our signature on their letter. As much as I'm supportive of saving the old growth, I believe that our local government in writing a letter will have a far more impact of being assertive, even though there are letters and letters and letters. We never stop doing the letter writing, and we never stop advocating. But as a local government, I think we can take the lead on that, and with any hope, some of our other communities that are also, well, the whole island is covered in forests, and so it's a concern for this island. We can implore them when we go to the AVICC and do some lobbying in that regard as well. I think that would actually support this group as well.
Mayor Little?
Yeah, and I think what we could also do is invite the Ministry of Forests here for a presentation to talk about it. I think respectful dialogue is a good way to go, and we could ask them to present, and we could give them some feedback in person, and I'm sure they'd be willing to do that. And it would be really nice to know what their policy is, has it been revised, and where they're going. And I think we can do that in a respectful way with the community and with the ministry.
Great, well, thanks for that input. I'll just mention that Premier Evie has given direction in a mandate letter to the Minister, I guess, of Forests to get on this. So there is actually movement going on at the provincial level. I think that people at MEASC, what was mentioned was this is kind of about accountable governance, the notion that the government promised things and isn't fulfilling those promises. So that was kind of the gist of some of the comments at MEASC. As regards writing the letter, I previously offered at council when Councillor Shukin mentioned it to draft a letter, and he was going to talk to some other folks. I've drafted a letter for Councillor Shukin's consideration, and he's looking at that and working on that. Sorry, I didn't remember to mention it earlier, but anyway, that we're following that path, and so that's all fine too. But Councillor Shukin,
was it a letter you sent me? I know you sent me the resolution. I don't recall seeing the letter, but.
Yeah, it's in the form of a letter. I took it from the letter that had been sent in 2016 by this council to do with the Vancouver Island AVICC, and it's a letter with the resolution embedded in it.
Thank you. Yeah.
But perhaps rather than any further discussion, we'll call the question, and the question is whether or not the Environment Committee will recommend to council to consider signing this United We Stand declaration at its January 23rd meeting. So all in favour? And all opposed? So Councillors Gray and Epp in favour, and Councillor Shukin, Mayor Little, and Councillor Epp opposed. So the motion fails.
Councillor Donaldson.
Excuse me.
Not me.
Councillor Donaldson opposed.
Councillor Gray, I would like to make a motion that I would like to make a motion toward writing a letter, as talked about, to government on this issue. And I'm struggling about the mechanics of it. Would it have to come back to this committee for consideration, or would it go directly to the mayor? I would be happy to do a first draft based on, again, the information you'd sent earlier. But.
Good.
Through the chair. What I would suggest is you both collaborate on the letter and then send it to council, and we'll consider it at council.
Okay.
Okay.
So I would make a motion that myself and Councillor Gray form a small subcommittee to work on this letter, and that it be brought to a future council meeting as expeditiously as possible.
Like the next one?
We need a. Oh, okay.
Second.
Yeah. Sorry. I'll let Councillor Gray manage it from here.
Yeah. So fair enough. Moved by Councillor Shukin and seconded by Councillor Donaldson. And can I just ask then for clarification? Is this to put simply a letter to the provincial government, or was this something you wanted to bring to AVICC?
Well, I think we should do both. I would like to draft the letter to, I believe it would be Minister Ralston, but yeah, and then the resolution is a separate matter.
So the motion would be to do both?
Yes, let's do both. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, so we'll call the question. All in favour? None opposed. Thank you. That passes.
Could I make a motion to invite Minister Ralston or his staff to present at a environment council meeting, or environment committee meeting, or council meeting in the near future? It wouldn't have to be as quick as with this letter for the resolution.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for the motion?
I'll second it.
Seconded by, moved by Mayor Little, that we invite Minister Ralston or a representative to Metchosin Council to discuss old growth logging in British Columbia, seconded by Councillor Donaldson.
And just a quick comment, I think our representative is a good move because we might get somebody who's tasked with this and can speak more knowledgeably or directly, not more knowledgeably, more directly about the issue than the minister. So thank you.
Any further discussion? No, we'll call the question. All in favor? All in passed. Let's go through. The next thing we have on our agenda is some correspondence, response actually from the Trans Mountain Coastal, from Trans Mountain. So people will recall on December 6th, the District of Metchosin, thank you to Mayor Little, we sent a letter to Trans Mountain in response to their report they'd written on the environmental assessment, EAO. The required section, what was it now? Number 35.
Condition.
Condition 35 of the environmental assessment for the Trans Mountain Pipeline, and that was to do with bitumen in the water. They've now responded to us, and I think it would be proper to refer this response to MEASC to take a look and see if we want to proceed further. The response to us is largely to say, oh well, we're doing the work that we've been tasked to do, and that the kind of comments that we'd offered back about maybe that work should be tested in our environment, they would say, well, that's out of scope of their report. They offer that not all research is peer reviewed, and when we were saying that, gee, it would be nice to see some peer review work, particularly given it's government funded. They offered that it's not pertinent to tell us the individuals that review the research to decide whether or not it should go forward. And they make other points to say that the issues around human health are not are completed with the requirements that they have, but they're not doing much more than that, and it's under a separate condition, condition 38. On the skimming operations, they say, oh well, it's actually not the new skimmers they told us about, but some of the previous skimmers in operation that will be working here. So the criticism of the skimming operation maybe wasn't as bang on as we thought. And a few other comments. Is this committee ready to send this response to MEASC and see what they might advise us? Moved by Mayor Little. Seconded by Councillor Donaldson. Any discussion?
Just a quick comment. Thanks for the summary, and yeah, if MEASC can have a look at that, that'd be great. I feel like we're really loading them up, but hopefully they don't mind that. It's important. Really, their last report was fantastic and really helped me to understand where this was. So.
Very little.
Yeah, I have to say I was a bit disappointed in their response. The report that was sent from MEASC was very comprehensive and very thoughtful, and I was a little bit surprised by some of their responses, to tell you the truth. Maybe I'll just leave it at that. I would like commentary from MEASC because they know more about this than I do. Yeah.
I agree, it is disappointing. Part of it being that it appears to be mostly sidestepping the issues or not taking them seriously enough. From the perspective, it may be true that some of the issues are beyond the scope, but it would seem to me a better response for them would have been to say, hey, and so we'll pass this on to corporate in Trans Mountain and make sure these issues are dealt with. It's a little bit interesting to think that the issues that were so important that were pointed out are just being pushed to the side rather than recognizing the importance of what's going on. So without any further discussion, maybe I'll call the question. The question is sending this document to MEASC for comments. All in favor? That's passed, thank you. None opposed. We have correspondence then from Bev Bacon and Alice Duke, both on the Anchorage question. We've dealt with that issue tonight. Thanks to both of them for raising this issue and the work that Alice has done in particular. And then we've just attached in the agenda the District of Metchosin's Declaration of Climate Emergency and Biodiversity Crisis. Thanks again to Mayor Little for signing that letter and circulating it to the CRD and all the local governments. I've heard some positive comments back from people in local government about it, so that's nice to have heard. We have no bylaws, no other business. Can I entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Did we deal with, sorry, the pink item, so this is page 3 of 26?
Yes, we did deal with the pink item. That's more correspondence
This is
from Bev
from
Bacon.
Bev Bacon, okay.
And we'll be sure to forward that to Miask as well.
Okay. Right.
So moved by Councillor Shukin, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. All in favor? Meeting adjourned. Thanks so much. Thanks for your patience, everyone.
Can't believe we got that meeting in.
Well, that's good.
I can see EOC was stressing me out.
What's EOC?
Testing.
EOC